Good evening, everybody. My name is Adam Bittner, digital sports producer for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. It is Thursday in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and this is our NFL Draft live stream with Joe Starkey, Christopher Carter. Right now, we're going to have lots of different guys coming through tonight. Ray Fittipaldo, Brian Batko, Andrew Destin. We expect to see all of them at some point, but for now, this is your trio. Joe, I guess I'll start with you. How are you?
Man, I'm excited. This is the best currency in all of sports tonight. It's called hope. Even the Cardinals have some.
Yeah, they are fired up after the selection. We're joining you just after the selection of Paris Johnson Jr., who a lot of Steelers fans loved as a potential tackle target for this team. He's off the board. So is Devin Witherspoon, who was taken one pick earlier.
Oh, do I love Devin Witherspoon.
I love him too.
He have looked good as a Steeler, right,
Yeah.
Chris?
Oh, he would have been brilliant. He would have never fallen far enough. He was way too – people were really high on Christian Gonzalez, but for all the hype on him as a cornerback, Devin Witherspoon was always going to be the top pick, and it just makes a lot of sense. So what's very interesting, though, is that we are at pick 6 here. An offensive tackle is off the board and a cornerback is off the board. Two of the key positions that we've been keying in on that the Steelers have been very interested in. But how far does Jalen Carter keep falling? He is not off the board. He was projected by many to be the best player you could pick in this draft class. Had the crazy offseason with, the trouble with the law. He didn't test well at his pro day. He came in overweight. So there's a lot of concerns. What's going on with him? But does he slip down far enough for the Steelers to want to go get him? Or do they go get Broderick Jones, Christian Gonzalez, or do they stay pat and wait for like a Joey Porter Jr.? There's so much to contemplate right now. And I do wonder, when do the Steelers get active in trades? Because I think they're going to make one at some point.
Yeah, we're just getting into the period now. We waited till 9 p.m. Some of you were wondering where we were, but we kind of thought, we'll let some of these first early picks trickle in before we get too far into it, because it's going to be a long night. Could be a long night. I think as long as they hold on to that 32nd pick, guys, there's going to be intrigue even after the Steelers make their first round pick, because you're going to be looking at who is dropping into that 32 range. Yep. Maybe they trade back into the first round. We're going to be here, I think, till the very end tonight, maybe not like previous seasons. Just a reminder before we really get going here, this live stream is brought to you by the Acrisure Fan Advantage, the power to project one of our Post-Gazette Steelers beat reporters into your home or office using augmented reality. That'll really get cranked up in earnest when we get back into the season, guys. But for now, Chris, with Paris Johnson and Devin Witherspoon and some of these targets flying off the board, does that suggest that maybe the Steelers are going to have to trade up if they want to get their guy, if it's one of those top 3 corners or those top 3 tackles we've been talking about for weeks?
It's been what we've been saying. Jerry Dulac wrote about it this morning. Brian Batko predicted it in his most recent mock draft. I've been saying it for about a week now. Like, the more and more I look at this board, Broderick Jones, Paris Johnson, who's already off the board, any one of these cornerbacks, the Steelers might have to trade up to get their team, to get their guy. And what's also crazy is other trades that are impacting this, like the Aaron Rodgers trade. Them swapping 13 and 15 between the Packers at 13 and the Jets now moving back to 15. I had for a while that the Steelers had to get ahead of the Jets at 13th overall, because they were going to be a team that if one of those top OTs was there, tackle going right to them, and most likely the Steelers that might be the third tackle off the board, and then the Steelers might have to wait. But now with the Jets moving back to 15, there's the question, okay, how far do they keep falling? But now I think it's just the continued question, where does the positions runs start at right now? Who do the Raiders take here? I think they love Christian Gonzalez, but they wanted a quarterback. There was a lot of hype on them getting Anthony Richardson, but the Colts took Richardson, so now Levis is falling down to them. There's a lot of talk going in. The Raiders pick is in now, so we're waiting to see who officially it's going to be.
Joe, you and I were talking off air right before we got on here. Jalen Carter's still there as far as we know. Some of you in the comments might know a little bit ahead of us if you're monitoring Twitter. We're going off of TV. But, Joe, you were talking that this is kind of the night of Jalen Carter for you.
Yeah, man. I mean, Chris mentioned it. This is becoming the Steeler-related story, at least as far as intrigue goes, is how far is this guy going to drop? They were linked to him a few weeks ago. And I think everybody's curious Here we go with the Raiders pick. Will they pick Jalen Carter? You go ahead, Adam.
Yeah, we are. Roger Goodell is at the microphone. I got the sound off, so I'm not going to know until the little chyron on the bottom tells me. Let's see.
Wow.
It is Tyree Wilson, the defensive end from Texas Tech. So Jalen Carter's trial continues. I guess I'll go to Joe first. What's your reaction?
I mean, it's not exactly a sexy pick, is it? Who's going to play quarterback for this team moving forward?
I mean, another thing, but I will say this: Tyree Wilson, I think, has all the makings of being a freak edge rusher. Like that guy, he's a person that we didn't talk about much here in Pittsburgh because he was going to go in this range, and there was just never a question there. I guess if the Raiders want to play that way, Jimmy G is their guy right now. So I guess if they're living with Jimmy Garoppolo, they're going to trust Josh Jacobs to continue running the ball well. But getting a Tyree Wilson, adding to the defense, this gives them another pass rusher. They combine behind him. But here's the crazy part. They got Chandler Jones and Max Crosby. Where are they putting Tyree Wilson unless they're moving one of those guys?
I thought this was the spot for Will Levis, man.
I thought so too.
I get it. I'm watching this kid. He is freakish. He is, but man, Levis is on the board for the Raiders. Jimmy G, come on.
Yeah, I agree. Unless they like some teams, they do all their research, their private investigations, and maybe there's a story that they heard that they didn't like about Levis of some sort, and that's why he's fallen. When we did, you guys know on the side I do with the Locked On Podcast Network, we did a full mock draft of every person that covers their team, picking for their team, and Levis fell all the way to 25 because there's just so many people that had just heard like, nope, he's not the guy. He's not the guy you want, and this was what I was wondering. If the Colts took Levis, Anthony Richardson, I think, would have been off the board by now, and we'd have our 4 quarterbacks picked, and then everyone would be asking, where does Hendon Hooker go? But now, Levis falling out of here, I don't know who takes them. Maybe the Titans at 11. There's a lot of things to consider right now.
If you're just a reminder to everyone, if you're just joining us, please feel free to ask some questions on YouTube. We're also streaming to the Post-Gazette Facebook pages tonight. You'll have to comment on PG Sports, I believe, not the main Post-Gazette page for us to see it here in our studio. But if you have questions or comments, please hop in, please chat. We're going to throw them out there. We need material. It's going to be a long night. David in the comments is asking if they're going to move up and get one of those 2 tackles that are left. I think he's referring to Broderick Jones and Peter Skoronski. That needs to happen now, soon. What do you guys think?
I got the Falcons probably taking. Whoa, wait a second. Okay, no, they're just showing Will Levis. I thought they were saying the Falcons did take Will Levis. That's the problem when you got the sound down here. But I think you still have some time before Broderick Jones goes, in my opinion. I think the Falcons either take a Nolan Smith or a Jalen Carter here. I think the Bears, they might take Broderick Jones, but I think the Bears might try to add a playmaker there at 9, or Peter Skoronski. I think he's more of a fit because they also would like an interior guy. If Jalen Carter falls to 10, the Eagles are taking him, no questions asked. That we've heard that's who they're getting. But that is, and then the Titans are a team that could take an offensive tackle. So it's just a matter of who are they most hyped about, who are they most excited about. Broderick Jones is one of 4 players that both received a top brass visit at his pro day from the Steelers, meaning Tomlin, Kahn went to see him at his pro day, and he was a top 30 visit. So for the Steelers. So to me, I think he's going to be a guy they have their eye on here, and they're just being very careful about it. But I think a sweet spot for a trade up could end up being number 12, where the Lions are at, if they feel like, because I've heard the Lions really like Pitt's Kalijah Cansey, and maybe they feel like they can get him later because of the way that this board is falling for DTs.
May I interrupt Adam for a moment?
No, you're not interrupting. You're just jump right in, Joe.
I wanted to ask Chris's opinion on the Bo Jackson poster behind me. You like that?
Oh, that's awesome. I love Bo Jackson.
How about that, huh, Adam?
That is pretty cool.
That's pretty great. Both teams,
including the Raiders, when they didn't draft Will Levis all these years later. But they got an edge rusher. Do I think the Steelers are going to trade up for a tackle? No. I think if they're going to trade up, I'm going to follow our colleague Jerry Dulac's hunch here and say it's going to be for the corner, Christian Gonzalez.
How much do you like him compared to Joey Porter, Joe?
I like him better. I think everybody likes him better than Joey Porter.
Agreed.
That's nothing against Joey Porter, but I think there's 2 top 10 corners in this draft, and one of them's already gone.
Mm-hmm.
He's just a cut above, I think, in terms of just raw talent. And I think there may be a couple things with Joey Porter. We were talking to Steve Jones from Penn State, the broadcaster today. Now, he had nothing but great things to say. Most people do, but there are a couple questions about Joey Porter as far as just having that one interception, as far as being a little bit handsy at times. And he seems to be dropping a little bit, doesn't he?
Yeah. I think that's definitely the case, Chris.
No, he's definitely dropping right now. There's a lot of questions as far as who's the priority. Man, who are the Falcons picking here? They're killing me because they could go in a lot of different directions. They've been a team who's been linked to a lot of different players. I thought they might be where Tyree Wilson went. I also think they could get Nolan Smith, another edge rusher. That would be on the board there. But they brought him with their top 30 visits. They brought in Jalen Carter, but he pulled out at the last minute because of his situation with the criminal investigation. That was a situation there. Bijan Robinson met with the Falcons. He could be, because a lot of people have him pegged as also one of the best playmakers in this draft. And Will Levis said the Falcons were his first interview. There's a lot of guys who could go here. So again, wait a second. The Eagles. Hold on.
Things are happening, folks. This is where we're at a disadvantage because normally I'd be sitting here glued to Twitter and I would know all of this stuff. But all right.
So the Falcons have made their pick, and the Eagles have traded up with the Bears. To me, that is the Jalen Carter pick.
You think?
Yeah. From all we've heard, the Eagles have been dying to get Jalen Carter because then they'd have Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter in the middle, reuniting the Georgia defensive tackles. They're just going to eat offensive lines alive.
Yeah, that is fearsome. They're doing some big brothers and big sisters promotion here before the pick. So now I feel like I'm stalling for time, Joe.
Here we go. Here's the Falcons selection.
He's going to announce it. Here we go.
Come on, Roger. Announce it.
Bijan Robinson.
Man,
the running back is off the board. Okay.
That's early for a running back. He's a special guy, though.
I'm telling you guys, you go watch his college tape. People say like he could be like the next Hall of Fame running back, like the guy that does that. Shout out Brian Batko. He wants his credit for the pick on Bijan Robinson here. But man, I had Bijan Robinson falling a few more spots, but now that he's gone at 8 to the Falcons, the Eagles have traded up to 9. To me, that means Jalen Carter is going to go there. If the Bears have now flopped down to 10, I had them taking Peter Skoronski at 9. They may feel that they can still take him there. Man, running out of space here because then the Titans are coming up. One thing that's very interesting, the AFC South is now all of a sudden getting a lot younger. You got Trevor Lawrence for the Jaguars over there. You got now Anthony Richardson for the Colts. You got the Texans with CJ Stroud. So do the Titans just want to chill with Ryan Tannehill, or do they want to go get one of the top their own rookie quarterback this year? So
what about the Eagles with Christian Gonzalez here? Didn't they lose a little bit from their secondary?
They brought back Darius Slay on a cheaper contract. That was a short display, but they could go get Christian Gonzalez. He absolutely could be on the board here. I've heard from a couple of friends of mine that have like really good Eagles connections, and they've been telling me, man, like they love Jalen Carter. If Jalen Carter falls, they would do anything to get him. The pick is in, so I guess they've told the NFL who they're picking. They're going to present here in a little bit, but Christian Gonzalez, Jalen Carter, those are my two options for the Eagles here to come off the board at 9.
I want to pull at this Bijan Robinson thread just a little bit here before we get into the possible Jalen Carter pick. Chris, what makes him special to you? Because we talk all the time. We talked, I think, 2 years ago with the Najee Harris pick about, running backs in the first round is just not a wise investment. What makes Bijan Robinson different?
Bijan Robinson is the most complete running back prospect I think we've seen in a while. He ran a 4.46 at the combine, so that's very good speed for a running back. But he's also he's big and strong. He's 5'11", 215. He can also run extreme routes like this. You can motion this guy out in the slot. He's going to be dangerous. He's going to be able to catch the ball in space, make guys miss. He projects to be a guy that you plug him in, you can build an offense around him. Unlike how, if teams waited for, Jahmyr Gibbs, some of the other running backs that are in this draft class, they'd be more complimenting, the quarterback on their roster. I think that this move, if the Falcons want to keep working with Desmond Ridder at quarterback, you give him a supreme running back that takes the pressure off of him, much like how I think the Steelers wanted Najee Harris for whoever was going to take over at quarterback when they made their pick after Ben left. I think this is a move to get a supreme talent there. And some people think that Bijan Robinson is a Hall of Fame running back, player just lying in wait. So I think that's the thing here is that, when you talk to even some of the hardcore analysts like Jordan Reed or Matt Miller, those guys at ESPN that do 7-round mock drafts, which is just insane. I can't do picking every team for 7 rounds, but those guys were saying like he is a top 5 player as far as talent per their position. So Bijan Robinson, the hype, we'll see if it's real when he puts on the Falcons uniform.
While Chris was talking, I checked Twitter. Everyone is on the same page with you, Chris, saying that this is probably going to be Jalen Carter. There's some reporting on it. Joe, my question for you is, I think we talked about 9 as one of those first spots that the Steelers could have traded up for anyone they wanted. And Jalen Carter was definitely on that list of potential guys. What do you think of them choosing not to do that? Granted, saying we don't know what Philly gave up to get that 9th pick.
Well, there may still be opportunity. That's the thing. The Eagles draft room just exploded in joy here. Can you imagine Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis up front for them?
We don't have to imagine. We just saw it a couple years ago when George was eating people alive with those guys.
Wow. There's Bijan Robinson. He's crazy. He better be a Hall of Famer if you're taking a running back that high in the draft, man. That's all I have to say with that one.
Yeah, that's the highest I can remember since Saquon Barkley from Penn State, which has worked out, I think, okay for the Giants. But I don't know if you're investing that kind of pick, is that what you want?
I mean, here's the thing. It all depends on where you want to rebuild. Like, I think that for the Falcons, if they feel like they have a nucleus that will get them back to being competitors sooner rather than later, running back's fine. My only problem with, I'm a big take the running back in the first round if you think if you think that he's that good, but only if you have other building blocks in place to hold your team. But if you're in a complete rebuild, that's where I wouldn't take a running back, because I do think that then you need to start amassing players that can be pillar players who can last you about 8 to 10 years, like offensive linemen, quarterbacks, cornerbacks, defensive linemen, guys that and premier guys at those spots, edge rushers, those type of guys who last a bit longer and can fill different roles, important roles on either side of the ball. So, but the Giants, they've made it kind of work because I think that they've done a really good job this year. I'm intrigued to see if they can double up on it and make it actually not just make it a one-hit wonder thing. But there were a lot of people questioning the Giants when they made that move, and even for the next 3-4 years, it wasn't until this past year where people were like, oh, okay, now it's working.
We just saw on the screen what the details of the trade were between Chicago and Philadelphia. It was basically just a 4th-round pick to flip spots. Obviously, they were very close in the draft order, so it was easier for the Eagles to trade up than it was for the Steelers to do that. So what do you guys think of giving up a 4th-rounder to get Jalen Carter?
I mean,
if he's your guy, he's your guy.
Yeah,
Jalen Carter has the potential. Yeah.
not exactly a ton of draft capital.
Right.
And there you go. Jalen Carter.
Called it.
It's official. He looks pretty good in that suit, guys. What do you think of that suit?
Interesting. Purple. Too bad the Vikings didn't take him. I don't know, man. This guy, I'm glad that the Steelers didn't make a move up for him. I am. It's concerning to me when you're at your job interview and you show up 9 pounds overweight.
Yeah.
And you have a disastrous day. He may turn out to be a superstar, but I think that's too much of a risk for the Steelers. So far, I'm glad they stood pat. And for all we know, they may have made an attempt, but it sure doesn't seem like it.
The pick's already in for Chicago, guys, so it doesn't look like it's going to be a long wait till we find out who the next guy is. Chris, I guess you're echoing Joe's thoughts there?
Yeah, I'm with you, Joe. Like, Jalen Carter would have been a nice dream of a pick if you pick him and then he's your next Cam Hayward and all that stuff. But man, like, there's so much other talent right now with the picks that they have that they could get some really good guys that address some real positions of need too. And defensive lines are a position of need. They need the next flag bearer for the defensive line for whenever Cam Hayward does retire. I don't think it'd be this year or even next year. But I think that you have to find his successor sooner rather than later. But Jalen Carter with those concerns, yeah. And let's face it, if those concerns didn't happen, if he doesn't get arrested, I mean, I was at the combine waiting for him to come to the podium when the tweet went out that was that was like, oh, there's a warrant for his arrest in Georgia, and then he had to fly back, and so everyone's like scrambling around the room, like what just happened? Why is he gone? What's going on there? And then you show up to your pro day 9 pounds overweight, you can't complete the drills. Those are legitimate concerns, and if you're the Steelers, you're like, you know what? There are a lot of really, really good players who could end up being, super talents for us that we don't need to take that chance on and not trade up picks to get. We can wait on that. So I think that's where the Steelers' brain was. But now I'm concerned here. What's the Bears' move? Because they could get protection for Justin Fields here. But I've also heard that they really like Jackson Smith-Njigba. Could he be the first receiver off the board? Man, we're getting closer here. And to me, once we get here, I think this is starting to be the sweet spot for if the Steelers want to trade up. These are the real teams that I think that they would start talking to. The Titans, the Lions at 12 is a little different because I thought that was going to be the Texans, but still talk to them. The Packers, I think maybe not as much because they just traded up into that spot with the Aaron Rodgers trade. But 14 Patriots, I think that is the last. Like get ahead of the Jets and the Commanders because they have similar needs to the Steelers. I think if the Steelers want to trade up, 14 would be the spot. And I just don't know how much farther a Christian Gonzalez or Broderick Jones fall for them.
Yeah, I'm picking up everything you guys are putting down on the Jalen Carter, opinion about, it's probably okay the Steelers didn't go for him. I think the thing that I always just in the back of my mind, I always just wanted to see what Jalen Carter could be with Cam Hayward in the same locker room. The consummate leader, the consummate professional. Could he have alleviated some of those issues? We'll never know now, and I think that's okay. But that's something that was kind of on my radar. Chris and Joe, Will Levis is still there. Where's he going? I mean, is he the guy who's dropping in this draft now?
I mean, is Tennessee already ready to give up on Malik Willis?
There's rumors that they
story?
have.
That's unbelievable to me.
It is crazy. I agree.
He was drafted as a long-term project, and he was thrown in way too early, and it looked horrible. I'll acknowledge that, but I'm not buying it that they're going to take Will Levis at 11. Then you got Detroit, no. Green Bay, no. Patriots, no, unless somebody trades up. Jets, obviously not. I don't think that's going to happen here. Not for the next 8 to 10 picks. You guys?
Chris?
I'm sorry. I'm filling out my big board here, just as far as the players that I have ranked and everything. looking at who we got here. Will Levis, I have a hard time because here's the thing. I thought if Will Levis was going to go, he was going to go early. But once we get to some of these other teams, I'm not sure if the Titans make the move for Will Levis. I think that they would rather go get a playmaker, wide receiver, or a supreme offensive lineman. The Lions maybe because maybe they're not happy with Jared Goff. The Patriots have talked about not liking Mac Jones, but some people have started to see through that as a smokescreen. The Jets just got Aaron Rodgers; they're not going to do it. The Commanders, maybe, but they got the kid from North Carolina. That's a good question. But I think one thing the Steelers would like is for these quarterbacks to start coming off the board. Two in particular, Will Levis and Hendon Hooker. If those two guys can come off the board before they pick, it'll help those other skill position players fall to them. But if they don't fall off by the time the Steelers pick, you want at least one of them to make it to 32, because then that's where I think people want to get really crazy with trade offers, because they're like, hey, we took a chance on him falling out the first round. Let's not take a chance on this quarterback falling even further. Let's go get our franchise quarterback with the top pick at the second round.
Darnell Wright gone.
Wow,
that was the pick.
Darnell Wright to Chicago is the pick. Guys, that's the second tackle off the board, right? Am I wrong?
That's the second tackle off the board, and I personally think that's a mistake. Darnell Wright's my fourth tackle. I think I've heard a lot of the things that I think that Broderick Jones has so much higher of an upside, is more complete of a player. It might work for the Bears, but I think that's a blessing for the Steelers, because I think that they prefer a Broderick Jones in this situation. But now you still have Peter Skoronski and Broderick Jones here. I think that's a win for the Steelers.
Short arm Skoronski. He's going to be a guard, don't you think, in the NFL? And I'm starting to get major Lucas Van Ness vibes. I don't know why. I'm just trying to feel this draft board like a Ouija board right now. Him, Nolan Smith.
Yep.
Those are the two guys, if they stay at 17, that for some reason I'm getting vibes on both those guys.
The very first Ray Fittipaldo mock draft was Lucas Van Ness.
Yes, it was.
And man, he would look like a savant for picking that one way back when. I was like, Lucas Van Ness, okay, I can see it, but I don't know how that's going to play out with the other positions. But here's another thing: Christian Gonzalez is now out of the top 10, and to me, like it was him and Devin Witherspoon 1A 1B for cornerback. That's another.
He ain't going to be there. Do you think he's going to be there? I don't.
Not at 17. Not at but that's a trade up to go get him or Broderick Jones at this point. But man, wait a second. Albert Breer says the Titans are taking Peter Skoronski, so get him off the board now too.
Do you like it when people tweet that out, or does that ruin the fun for you guys? It ruins the fun for me.
See, I'm working, so give me the information faster, so I don't have to watch the NFL haul up some other like old player that people forgot about, and he like entices the crowd, and then he gives the pick. No, just tell me who the pick is so I can get on with my job.
Joe, last year I enjoyed it last year because my girlfriend really wanted them to pick Kenny Pickett, and I knew 2 picks ahead of time what was going to happen, but she was not on Twitter. She was just watching. She loves to watch. She loves to watch the draft for the outfits. That's her big thing. And so I enjoyed watching her see it live when I knew what was happening. But I think that was a specific example. I kind of do like the intrigue and the drama, and having it spoiled by Twitter. I'm a little bit with you, Joe. I can wait 5 minutes.
Yeah, I mean it's a live TV show that you want the suspense. You don't want spoiler alerts, but I also understand what Chris is saying. The man is at work right now. He simply wants the info.
Yeah. I mean, I can see. I mean, we're journalists too, right? I mean, I can see both sides. As a viewer, no, I don't want it. As a journalist, yeah, I want to know as quick as possible so I can react and kind of be thinking about the next thing. So, yeah, I can see both sides. But wow, I think 3 tackles off the board at this point. Darnell Wright, to me, guys, was kind of the safety valve pick. He was the safe guy that I think we were all counting on being there. How does it shake up your view of where we're going that he's not? And you know, let's say Broderick Jones goes in the next 2 or 3 picks. How does that change your view of the Steelers draft board?
I'm not positive they were going tackle anyway. I still think cornerback is their top priority, and they might surprise us. They might surprise us with Van Ness. I mean, defensive line is always a need in this league. That's how you win. You destroy teams up front. Super Bowl winners do that every year, and he's also a guy who could toggle up front and also as an edge rusher. And you're going to need one of those probably. I don't know. Is TJ going to be healthy? One thing I don't want to hear with the Steelers anymore or ever again is, they're 10-0 with TJ Watt and 0-7 without him. It's ridiculous to be that dependent on one guy.
It changes the whole defense. I mean, it's just striking as even a casual fan can see the difference.
Who would you pick right now? If your gut feel is what for the Steelers as we sit here right now, both of you?
I would take if Gonzalez is there at 17, and I mean we're not that far. I'm taking Gonzalez. I think
I'm still on Broderick Jones. I agree with you, Joe, that cornerback makes a lot of sense, and they don't often get a chance at a top cornerback in the NFL draft. The only reason I am high on Broderick Jones, he's been my best offensive tackle. Like I think it is a mistake to take Darnell Wright over him. I think Paris Johnson and him are very comparable. I think Peter Skoronski and him. I think Skoronski's more of an inside guy, but that's neither here nor there. I think he's also a very talented offensive lineman. But the thing is that after this group, I think there is a sharp fall for the offensive tackle talent. So if you wanted to add to offensive line and offensive tackle in this draft class and get a guy who's going to contend with either of your starters to be a starting offensive lineman this year, you got to get Broderick Jones at this point because he's the last guy that I have slated there. But here's the thing about cornerback. I could go to the second round. You can get Julius Brents. You can get Emmanuel Forbes. You can get Kelly Ringo. There's about 5, 6, 7 cornerbacks that I think the Steelers would love to get in the second round. I cannot say the same thing at offensive tackle. And that's why I think they should make sure that the top pick is the offensive tackle and bank on the rest.
Chris, who's your next tackle? Is it Anton Harrison? He's been a name that's been connected to the Steelers a lot in the second round. Is he the next? I mean, who's your next guy if Jones is off the board?
How about DeJuan Jones?
I like DeJuan Jones's, like, his frame is ridiculous. He's super big, but he hasn't put it together. Like I still need to see him kind of grow into his frame a little bit. And there's been other guys that have come through the NFL who have had frames and just kind of relied too much on them. And I think there's a lot of people concerned, will DeJuan Jones put in the effort to fill out his frame, to completely master his craft? And he hasn't needed to. And I think that there's concern that he won't in the NFL. If you get him in the second round, okay, you got him in the second round. You know, his behemoth size would make him with a huge upside if he puts it all together. I think it's just a question if he could put it all together. Whereas Broderick Jones, I think that he is a couple like shoe shine polishes away from being one of the premier offensive tackles out there, and he will be a bully for the Steelers offensive line. I think they will run behind him a lot and get a lot of successful plays. He also pulls and blocks very well in space. He's a great athlete.
It looks like Roger Goodell currently is making, the Peter Skoronski pick is official. Independent of the Steelers, do you guys like that pick for Tennessee, given we were just talking about Malik Willis, and maybe they're not sure about him? Oh, Chris has breaking news, I think.
The Lions are taking running back Jahmyr Gibbs. There are 2 running backs off the by 12. What is happening?
I'm speechless, Chris. Tell me more.
Albert Breer just reported this, but Albert Breer, when he says stuff, he's not lying to you. Man, this changes up a whole lot because the 12 pick, there still hasn't been a receiver taken. Jackson Smith and Jigba is still on the board, which means he could be the Packers pick right here. And I think a lot of us resigned the Packers to taking Dalton Kincaid as the top tight end because we were sure a wide receiver would get picked by now. But now they can take a wide receiver here and give Jordan Love his top option now. The Steelers, so now, okay, with Packers, sorry, I'm doing math right in front of you. There's 4 picks ahead of the Steelers, right? So Broderick Jones, Christian Gonzalez, Nolan Smith, Joey Porter Jr., Jackson Smith-Njigba.
Here's
the Steelers
my
are
question.
getting very close to getting to just being able to stay at 17 and just get a player that they
How
really
about
love.
Nolan Smith? That's Jeremy Fowler saying that he has knowledge that Nolan Smith ain't getting past pick 17.
I love Nolan Smith. He's explosive. He's athletic. I think he would fit right in with the Steelers. You could put him on the edge. I think that his athletic skills will allow you to flex him to help an off-ball linebacker a little bit, not as like a permanent job, but it would make it so you could pay Alex Highsmith now, and then while Nolan Smith is on his rookie deal, when he's off his rookie deal 4 or 5 years from now, you can figure out what you want to do with Highsmith and TJ Watt, where they are in their careers. I think it would give you an edge rushing trio that would just be one of the best in the NFL. I had a conversation with Von Miller during the combine. We were kind of perusing around, and I bumped into him at a party, and he was nice enough to talk with us for a couple of us for a few minutes. And we were asking him, who does he like? And he's like, I love Nolan Smith. He's like, that guy is going to dominate the NFL for a long time. He reminds me of myself. So when Von Miller says that about a guy, and Von Miller, by the way, he was at the combine doing preliminary work because he wants to get into front office work and someday be a GM. For him to say that about Nolan Smith, that's why I think it's that would be a very intriguing pick. I think Steelers fans might be upset at first because it's not a tackle, it's not a corner, but Nolan Smith will be a player they love for many years.
You and I have talked about him a lot as a potential guy, but I don't know that we ever saw him as toward the top of the list, Chris. Here's my question for you, Joe, and I guess Chris as well. Is Green Bay the spot you got to swap with if you're going to go get Broderick Jones? Because there are some teams between here and the Steelers that want tackles. Is this where they have to go if they're going to get Broderick Jones?
The Patriots could take an offensive tackle. The Jets could take an offensive tackle. And I think the Commanders would be more in line for a cornerback. But yes, I do think the Packers would. The only thing is the Packers, I think that they traded up to get this. They traded, they traded to get this pick for Aaron Rodgers. I think they want to use this pick on a playmaker and be like, Pittsburgh, get out of here. We don't got time for your wants and needs. We want to get our playmaker now. But maybe if you're the Steelers, you could sell, look, we're just getting ahead of these guys who want offensive tackles and cornerbacks and don't want wide receivers. You could still get Quentin Johnson or Jackson Smith-Njigba or Dalton Kincaid at tight end at 17. And by the way, here's the 80th pick or something like that. So yeah, I'm still all for trading up to make sure you get your guy, but the Steelers are getting very close to not needing to do that.
What are the Lions doing? They just took a running back at number. They could have had Nolan Smith.
Don't they have a running back?
The way you just talked about him, they could have had Christian Gonzalez. They take a running back, 2 running backs in the top 12 picks.
It's
When's
crazy.
the last time that happened? What year?
I don't even know, man. I really don't.
That's
I can do some
crazy.
quick research here.
That is the surprise of the draft, and it's not close, right?
Oh, I'm shocked. Doesn't Detroit have their run? They look fired up. I am watching on the screen now. They are fired up for this pick.
So Jamal Williams was their guy, right? And then they had what's his face from Georgia, DeAndre Swift, right? So they had those guys, but there was the sense that they weren't happy with either of them as supreme playmakers in their offense. But I'm with you, man. That's a weird pick. And they had 6 overall. Like they traded down to get that running back at 12.
Right.
I'm so perplexed from them.
And they're fired. They are. I mean, if you guys saw, I'm watching the ESPN feed. I don't know what it is on ABC or NFL Network, but
they just won the Super Bowl.
Yeah, exactly. So all right, the Green Bay still winding the clock down here. We are at 4 minutes and change until they make their pick. Are they feeling called?
I think the Steelers are going to trade in here and take Gonzalez. I think they're going to trade to this pick right now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm wondering if they're on the phone right now. I mean, probably the phone call is resolved because there's only 3 minutes left, but you know what I mean.
You should have bugged their phones when you were down there, Chris.
Yeah, what was I thinking? I should have snuck in there and done some sleuthing.
The pick is in, and it looks like Green Bay is sticking at 13 because usually by now on the broadcast, if we're in commercial, usually by now on the broadcast, if teams are going to flip, they have flipped the graphic, and it's still Packers. So it looks like the Packers are going through with the 13th pick. So if that's the case, Chris, are you thinking it's Smith-Njigba or Kincaid?
It's tough. I still think Smith-Njigba because I think that he is a better playmaker on the field. I think Dalton Kincaid is a very fine tight end. He is the top tight end of this class. I think they'd be very happy with him. But I'm also starting to feel like, guys, like I'm sipping over on my Pepsi Zero Sugar here. I feel like I'm sipping on tequila with how crazy this draft has been, trying to keep up with it. Like this is insane. The running back thing, man. I never predicted Jahmyr Gibbs. I thought if anything, Gibbs would have been the Bengals at 28 or some crazy stuff like that. It would have been like, okay, luxury pick by a team that drafted that low. But man, yeah, I got a Jackson Smith-Njigba here, but I originally had Dalton Kincaid slotted to them. So, man, crazy times. I also think the Patriots could take Nolan Smith at 14. But yeah, this is getting crazier.
Former Post-Gazette beat writer, Pirates beat writer Mike Persak, formerly resident Detroit Lions fan, seems to like the Jahmyr Gibbs pick. Just passing that along for those of you who liked Mike and his Twitter content. He is, I believe, out of the industry now. Lucky for him, right?
Yeah, I mean, wait,
I'm just pumped. He seems pumped.
He should be pumped. I think that. Well, again, he's a Lions fan. I'm not on the Jahmyr Gibbs 12th overall. I think he was going to be a solid running back for somebody. I guess it's the draft, like you said. It's eternal hope, Joe. Like this is the time of the year where you're zero. Everyone is undefeated, right? And now you've gotten the player of your dreams, or the guy that you could sell as your dreams. But I have a hard time any person from Detroit telling me that Jahmyr Gibbs was their hope as their top first round pick, because they still have another one at 18 lined up here.
Just want to do a quick reset here. We are 42 minutes into the stream. I want to I have almost 200 viewers right now, which is great. Thank you all for joining us. Just a reminder, we're brought to you by the Acrisure Fan Advantage, the power to project one of our Steelers beat reporters into your home or office using augmented reality. Just want to remind you, if you're just joining us for the first time, we've been doing so much YouTube content leading up to the draft. Please pop a like on the stream here for us. Please subscribe to the channel so you can get all of the reaction to the pick the Steelers make tonight. We're going to be doing another live stream tomorrow. Paul Zeiss will be here. He's on the radio tonight, but he will be here for Friday night's live stream. You can check that out.
Packers just took Lucas Van Ness.
Oh, wow. All right. Forget the reset.
Throw it all out. Nothing matters.
Joe, what do you think of that? He was the guy you were kind of getting the vibe for.
I think it's a good pick for them.
He's a very good player, man.
But if what you're saying about Nolan Smith is true, why is he lasting this long? Everybody wants people who can tackle the quarterback.
He's 6'2", so he's a little bit shorter.
Maybe Van Ness will be that guy.
But I think some people look at him and they see his size and they're like, well, he's more of an OLB, and a lot of teams are going with four-man fronts that are more like traditional, big defensive line, the big defensive ends. Man, I'm sorry. I'm catching my breath here.
13.
I did not think that Broderick Jones and Christian Gonzalez would be sitting here at 14.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, Chris, let's do the math here. You've got Christian Gonzalez. You got 4 picks to the Steelers. You've got Christian Gonzalez, Joey Porter Jr., Broderick Jones, and Jackson Smith-Njigba. I mean, I think Steelers fans would be happy with all 4 of those guys, right? I mean, if that's your first round pick.
Yeah, I'm going back to grab my tweet that I made, because I have a big board of 92 players, because I was going up to anyone that I thought they could reasonably take with their picks in the first 3 rounds. And my big board, which was this was the guys left after Skoronski was taken at 11, was Broderick Jones, Christian Gonzalez, Nolan Smith, Joey Porter Jr., and Jackson Smith-Njigba. And all of those guys are still available as the Patriots are ready to take at 14. This is working out very well for the Steelers, because now with the Patriots at 14, there are only 3 teams ahead of you. Any one of those 5 players is going to fall. There's at least 2 of those 5 players are going to fall to the Steelers. The Steelers just traded up. They took the Patriots pick.
All right, here we go, folks. Here we go. It has begun. We are at 9:45 Eastern. We thought the Steelers might not be picking for a while, but here we go. the Steelers have traded up. It's not yet reflected on television, but okay. So who is worth trading up to 14 for you guys? We thinking it's Broderick Jones, given the tackle neediness.
Either him or Gonzalez.
Him or Gonzalez.
I mean, if you follow Dulac's plan here, it's going to be Gonzalez. Well, let's see. It's why I would say it's one of those two, right, Chris?
Those are my top two right there.
Yeah, I think it's to me. I probably would lean Jones just because if they're trading up, there's a reason and they think one of these other teams are going to take a corner, right? I mean, who of that group would you expect to take Gonzalez with Broderick Jones on the board?
1 minute, man. I'm still I'm still catching up here.
Yeah, we keep looking at the Twitter. We're gonna deputize Chris to be monitoring the Twitter. Just yell when you see it, because that might be coming out before they make the official announcement. But
do we know what they traded yet?
Does not.
It had to have been a lower round pick.
Could it have been?
I mean lower than second.
It's definitely not a second round pick. At worst, it's a third.
Do you think it's possible the fourth?
It is possible to be the fourth because it's so close.
There's the Steelers draft room.
Andy Weidel, Omar Khan, Art Rooney, 1, 2, 3 there, right in the middle. A lot of people in there though. I'm gonna say it's Broderick Jones, and I will. If I'm wrong, and Jerry Dulac nailed this one. We're going to.
This is an all-time call by Jerry to put that out this morning. If this is Christian Gonzalez, I've been on the Broderick Jones train for quite some time.
They have the camera on Broderick Jones right now. They're shuffling hats in the background. There are a lot of hats. I mean, they're prepared for anything there at the Broderick Jones household.
It's the fourth rounder.
The fourth round pick.
So the Steelers just trade it up. They can get Gonzalez or Jones, and they still have both second round picks and the third round pick. That heck of a move. Omar Khan is cooking.
I think that we're going to know momentarily who the pick is, Chris. But if do you think that makes it more likely they trade the second round pick? The 32, because you were talking a lot leading up to this. That they're in a position to make moves with that 32nd pick. They've held on to it, and they're about to make their first round pick. Do you think that makes it more likely?
Yeah, I've said all along. I think the move is to trade up at the first round, trade down in the second round. I think that they could get some really good value for that, and this could be the best of both worlds. Man, this is these are some heck of a developments here.
Joe, who do you think it's going to be, and who do you want it to be?
I want it to be Gonzalez, but the vibe here and they just showed Broderick Jones seems to be pointing towards
Broderick Jones. Call that. Let's get it. The Steelers are taking Broderick Jones.
Breaking news on the live stream. It is Broderick Jones. We've talked a ton about it. Joe, what's your first reaction?
I mean, you can't complain about getting an offensive tackle. I think they need a number one corner. They need one. I look at that secondary. They need one, but maybe they'll get it at 32.
I agree.
God knows there's enough guys left on the board. They may get Porter. They may get Joey Porter at 32.
They might. They're Joe. Let me tell you, Julius Brents out of Kansas State. Even if all those other guys go, he's a guy that if they get him in the second round, he reminds me of Ike Taylor with hands. Like that's. I think that he's a guy that could play. He's not as fast as Ike was, but he has size. He has very good technique. His footwork is elite. He turns his hips very well. He mirrors wide receivers extremely well. If they got him in the second round, they got their top corner. This is a win. This is a win in my book for the Steelers right now, guys. I have to hop off for like about 5 minutes, but I'll be right back. I just got to do some things because the Steelers took this guy.
No problem, Chris. Chris will be right back. Joe, I want to talk a little bit about Chris's logic because he was saying they're going to be corners on the board after this, but there aren't tackles that you can get excited about. You seem to like Christian Gonzalez, but how do you feel about some of those other names we've talked about later on? Keely Ringo, Emmanuel Forbes, Julius Brents is someone that Chris is very high on. If they hold the 32 pick, they don't make any moves, or maybe they trade up into the first round possibly, maybe they trade 5 spots up and they get a Keely Ringo, one of those guys we're talking about. How do you feel about that as a 1-2 punch?
That's fine. I just want to get a corner with one of the first 2 picks. I'm starting to feel like they could get Joey Porter at 32. They could. I mean, Deonte Banks is a guy you didn't mention from Maryland.
Yeah, he's on there too.
There could be multiple opportunities, and maybe they're thinking exactly what Chris said, that to get a tackle of this caliber, you're not going to get that lower, whereas the corners may be more even. Although, man, it sure seemed from everything you read coming into the draft that Christian Gonzalez was, except for Witherspoon, was a cut above everybody else. Apparently nobody thinks that way.
Yeah, I think between him and Will Levis, those are the 2 big shocks of the draft for me so far. Do you think he's going to be that day 1 left tackle, Joe? I think that's the next question we have to ask now is he's the guy. The Steelers have Dan Moore and Chuks Okorafor on the right and the left. Where does Broderick Jones fit in on opening day? You know, given that obviously they want him to be that guy eventually, but where do you think he's going to be on opening day?
I think he's going to be starting. I mean, the only person right now who's not rejoicing in Pittsburgh is Dan Moore. I can tell you that. It looks like his days are numbered. You don't take a guy here to not have maybe not game 1, but if I was betting, I would say game 1. You don't take a guy like this to not have him start really right away. For me, the kid's an incredible athlete. He destroys people. Just reading up on him right now, 12 big-time blocks, which is sort of the equivalent of a pancake block to Pro Football Focus, which was second among all tackles in the country. So you're getting one of those guys at a premium position.
And between Chuks and Dan Moore Jr., okay, let's say Broderick Jones is getting one of those spots. Who do you like more in the short term? Who do you like more in the long term to kind of, I think that's a competition now, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, they're the same guy to me. They're both very average tackles in the league. They can get out of the Chuks contract at any point. For all I know, they may move Dan Moore to the right side, get out of the Chuks deal, and go with Broderick Jones on the left side. Who knows what could happen at this point? But to me, both those guys are just very average players. Could you win with them? Probably. But, man, if you have a chance to upgrade, you take it.
Is the story for you now, Joe, like how far these corners fall? Because we're still, I think there's only one off the board, and you're at pick 15, so you're only 17 away from the Steelers. So we're exactly where we were when we started this. They were 17 picks away from the top of the draft. They're 17 picks later. Joe's got, what do you got, Joe?
I've got, sorry, I just got interrupted there. I have Joey Porter as their next pick. I think would be great. But what was your question? I lost my train of thought.
Well, yeah, I was just saying, is that the story of the draft for you now? As how far
Absolutely.
all these corners fall? Because you've got so many of them on the board.
Mike Tomlin came out the other day and said there's no glaring needs. They have a glaring need. There might as well be a neon sign around it. No number 1 corner. They got to have one. They got to get one. I'm going to be stunned if their second pick is not a corner. Who knows? They didn't give up anything hardly to get this guy. They could move up again and take Gonzalez. Would that be unbelievable or what?
Yeah, I think that should be in play, right? I don't think it's a scenario we ever really talked through, is all of these corners being available so late. But now that we're here, do you give up? If you can give up that number 49 pick, and I think the problem is you've already given up the 4th. So all you really have left as a bargaining chip this year is that 3rd round pick. But what do you give up to get one of those guys if you can end up getting Broderick Jones and one of the top corners that we talked about?
I mean, not much if you're watching the trends right now, right? I'm getting some feedback from a former Steeler who doesn't like this pick, and I'm going to ask him why right now. I can let you know what he says in a minute, but you take that 32nd pick and move up now, or you just wait for one of those corners to fall in your lap. Who knows what they're thinking, though? They may be thinking Jordan Addison for Kenny Pickett.
That would be pretty fire. Yeah, and the Jets are still on the clock here, so I think they're taking some time trying to make this pick. man, I'm still in a little bit of shock of not just who the Steelers took, because I think a lot of us expected that they were going to end up there with Broderick Jones as one of their top options. But the fact that there are so many guys still left that we've talked a ton about. Joe, we did the mock draft tracker every week, and we talked a lot about these names that we thought would be gone. We thought Christian Gonzalez, Joey Porter Jr., Devin Witherspoon, they'd all be gone. Those 3 top tackles might be gone at 17. We were talking about what happens at that point. But now they already have Broderick Jones in the fold, and I think they have 2 of those other guys still out there. Plus, the other thing that I think we need to talk about, Joe, is there are some really good names that have fallen. Chris was talking about Nolan Smith earlier. He's really good.
Yeah.
Zay Flowers as a receiver, he's number 4 on Mel Kiper's big board. And then Jackson Smith and Jigba. Obviously, there's a great Pittsburgh connection there with the Pirates, Kanan Smith and Jigba. It's not just the corners that are falling. Is there anyone off? I know your answer. You're going to say corner. But is there anyone off the board that we weren't talking about of these guys who were still there that you'd say, hey, if the Steelers got this, that'd be great?
I mean, well, Gonzalez is the story as far as people dropping along with Will Levis, right? And obviously, that's not Steeler related, but the fact that Will Levis is still sitting out here, that might be the biggest story in the draft, right? That he's out here.
And someone is going to take him, Joe. I would, unless he's going to pull like a Malik Willis, those first round, those guys we were talking about as first round quarterbacks last year that fell all the way to the 3rd round. Which I'll say this, Joe, I wouldn't be shocked, considering this is a guy who got beat out by Sean Clifford at Penn State, and It wasn't particularly close, right? Is this vindicating James Franklin at all? Not to detour too far into the college football talk, but does James Franklin feel a little bit vindicated today?
I mean, it's sort of like the Flacco Tyler Palco thing from Pitt. It might be easy someday to look back and say, man, that was crazy. But you had a productive winning quarterback in place in both places. And we'll see down the road. I'm not sure if at this particular moment, James Franklin needs vindication for that or is feeling any. Some people might look at it that way. I don't. I think that story, the Will Levis NFL story is yet to be told. I don't think Franklin needs to be vindicated on that, frankly. Do you?
Well, I would agree with you, but I think there are a lot of Penn State fans who preferred Levis to Sean Clifford and said he could have been the guy to maybe make that difference. And I mean, you're down to the last 9 minutes against Ohio State. Is Levis the guy that makes the difference in that situation? I don't think so. I think Sean Clifford was the better passer, and so I'm not shocked to see Will Levis falling because I don't know that I ever had that high of an opinion of him to begin with.
Yeah. I think I'm in your boat on that one. Where's Chris when we need him? He's got these picks before they even make them on TV. The Jets pick is in.
Yeah, we're back. Can
you imagine pairing Gonzalez with Sauce Gardner?
That'd be unbelievable, wouldn't it? I mean,
my God,
those 2 guys together and the talent that he has. But yeah, at least we're back, Joe. To you and I kind of like the suspense of looking on TV. I don't know if all of you and all the viewers here, they might know, they might be on Twitter, but you and I are going to learn here on TV together. There is a young man here who's very fired up.
I hope that's not their pick. He's only like 9 years old.
Well, you never know how they're going to develop, Joe.
He's smaller than Gunnar Olszewski.
For now. We can only hope for his sake that he ends up being taller. He is a Make-A-Wish child.
Oh, look at him, Kyle Stickles. That's
Stickles.
Amazing. And he's going to make the pick.
That's pretty cool. I don't mind this when they bring out these other people to announce the picks. I think it adds to the value of the night. Especially when you get into the later rounds, I think.
It's awesome. This kid is imploring the crowd here. Is this going to be Gonzalez to go with Sauce Gardner? This is going to be incredible. How about Nolan Smith? Give them a nice pass rusher.
Yeah,
I think Smith and Jigba with Garrett Wilson, 2 Ohio State receivers for Aaron Rodgers. This is fascinating.
Yeah, those guys were on that Rose Bowl team 2 years ago that beat Utah. They were amazing at the time. Here we go. What's the pick? Oh, he's leading a Jets cheer now. He is fired up.
Will McDonald, the linebacker from Iowa State. How about that pick? Holy
That's off the board too, Joe. Man, Christian Gonzalez is still on the board. I mean, this is not a great night for the mock drafters, Joe.
Man, I'll say he is said to be an explosive pass rusher. And was the 17th, at least on ESPN here, was the 17th rated prospect. So this doesn't seem like a stunner, but it's probably higher than most had him projected, right?
Certainly. I will say that I've been so locked in on these Steelers picks that this is probably the least I've ever really studied for the top of the draft because the Steelers had so much available to them with those 3 picks. Okay, Christian Gonzalez, Will Levis, they continue to fall. I'm not sure we're surprised that Will Levis wasn't the pick for the Jets, given what they just went out and did. Joe, what do you think about the Broderick Jones pick in the context of Lamar Jackson's not going anywhere? I think that was the big news of the NFL day before we got into the NFL draft. How does that, maybe shape your view of where the Steelers go from here?
It really doesn't. You're talking about the Lamar Jackson signing. I think that most people probably projected that Lamar would be back. I think the Steelers need to worry about their own franchise quarterback, and that's why this pick is, highly defensible. It is. I think anything that you do to make life easier for the most important player on your team, and that's Kenny Pickett, is a very defensible pick. I've been looking at a lot of reviews of Broderick Jones. Seems like a project. I don't often like to hear that word associated with people. Maybe it's a, response to people like Artie Burns and the like. I'd rather have a ready to play, pop him in and play type guy. I hope that Broderick Jones is that. He better be ready to play soon if you make a pick that high. So, but it's certainly defensible because you're getting your most important guy, potentially a blindside protector for the next 10 years.
Joe, you mentioned you had a former Steeler weighing in on the pick with you. Do you care to share any more of the contents of that conversation?
It hasn't evolved yet.
Okay.
He said Omar is 0 for 1 and he lost a 4th round pick. I said, you don't like that pick? I'm waiting for his response. I'll be glad to share it when he does.
Very nice. All right. So let me ask you this, Joe. On the continuum of safe, defensible pick and exciting pick, on that spectrum, where do you put Broderick Jones?
Safe and defensible. I don't know that it's an exciting pick. I don't. Getting the next Jonathan Ogden would be exciting. Getting Paris Johnson would be exciting. This may very well be a good pick. It's a safe and good pick. A very defensible pick, but exciting? Not to me.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I don't know how exciting a tackle, could ever be for most fans because, it's right. A tackle. But I think at the very least you got one of those. To me, there was only ever 6 guys that we talked about is you've got to get one of those 6. Broderick Jones was in that group. I could have accepted Darnell Wright. I might have been able to accept Deontay Banks, but as maybe like second tier options. And
yeah,
if all those guys were off the board, but to me, he was always in one of those 6, and so it's hard for me to really get into, I don't know, hot takery now, considering that's how I felt for 4 months.
Right, and I did get a response from my former Steeler who said cornerback would have been my call. They'll get one in the 2nd round. Listen, I think we all lean toward skill players when we talk about exciting picks. Like if they take Jackson Smith and Jigba, everyone's going to go nuts. Or Jordan Addison. Jordan Addison would be the most exciting pick, right? And maybe that's just a bias that we all have. I'll acknowledge that. Would short arm Skoronski have had people throwing ticker tape out their windows? I don't know. but I can tell you that, maybe Nolan Smith as a little bit, but certainly a receiver would. He would. Maybe Kalijah Cansey would. If he's the 32nd pick, because he's a Pitt guy. I also happen to think he's a really good player. But an offensive tackle, again, unless it's that guy, and in this draft, it sure seemed like Paris Johnson was that guy. Arizona traded into the 6th pick to get him. If it's not that, then it's going to be hard for people to get too worked up about, I think, in terms of excitement.
Yeah. And the thing is, I think if he becomes the long-term, if he becomes the guy that's there for 10 years, then it doesn't matter who you didn't pick, in my opinion, because you need that, right? And I think that's what the thing that's unsaid is the Steelers haven't really had a guy on that line that's been the man since David DeCastro retired, right? Since Marquise Pouncey was out there. They've had some decent linemen, but I think you can't. I don't think you can win, Joe, without having at least one guy on that line who's the guy, right?
You want to have the guy, yes. Hopefully he's it. When I see the word project attached to somebody, it's a little bit concerning, but hopefully he's it.
Yeah, and I will say this about some of those scouting reports too, Joe, is that sometimes these guys just have to nitpick, right? Their editor tells them the Commander's pick is coming in here, so we'll appraise you of that when it flashes across the screen. But
they took Emmanuel Forbes, cornerback, Mississippi State.
He's the second corner off the board is Emmanuel Forbes. He has
bird milk.
Yeah, he's got great ball skills, Joe, but he's 165 pounds. Like, I think I could tackle him.
I know. Christian Gonzalez is becoming the cornerback version of Aaron Rodgers in the green room, falling through the whole first round here.
Yeah, I am shocked by that pick. Like, I wouldn't have been surprised to see Forbes end up somewhere in the first round in the 20s. Just especially if those quarterbacks were off the board, and he does have great ball skills. Like, they're showing it all the interceptions and stuff on the screen right now, and you can't take that away from him. He did it all in the SEC, but he's still a slight man at the NFL level, and to be the second corner off the board to me is that's a great pick 6. That does look great. The tape looks good, Joe. I will say that.
Belichick and his dog are now on the clock.
Yes, with the Steelers pick. So I think that'll be an interesting one.
And the Lions. We'll see if the Lions take another running back. I can't believe they took a running back with the 11th pick?
Yeah, and they traded to do it, right?
12th pick.
No, I think they did not try. I don't know. My brain's already scrambled, Joe, and we're only 17 picks into 2 nights of live streaming.
My mind is just blown by that. I can't believe it.
And it's making lots of other teams' jobs easier, I feel like.
Yeah, I agree.
Because there's just some great names still out there, and we're now in the back half here. We're on the back 9 of this first round. Forbes was, again, I think a lot of people had him as 5th, 6th corner off the board, and he's number 2.
Yeah, here we go. The Patriots selection is in.
Rapid fire.
Who do we have here? Christian Gonzalez.
He's off the board. Christian Gonzalez.
I'll say this, Adam. We always pick guys to compare from drafts and track their careers. Le'Veon Bell and Eddie Lacy, Chris Johnson, Rashard Mendenhall. Guys every year, whether it's somebody jumped in and picked them right ahead of the Steelers or whatever. To me, I'm going to be watching Broderick Jones and his career, tracking it along with Christian Gonzalez. I am. That's what if you were going to trade up to snag somebody, or you could have sat here and got him, it would have been Gonzalez. Without giving up an asset, you take care of your most glaring need. So to me, that's what I would have done. And that'll be my point of comparison. Who becomes the better player here? Who's the better pick? This kid This kid solves a lot of problems for the Steelers. And I think he starts right away, Gonzalez. But they went with the tackle. And again, it's a perfectly defensible pick.
Yeah.
Interesting that Belichick gets the corner, though.
Yeah, I think it's like you said, it's a perfectly defensible pick, and I guess the thing we'll never know is, if the Steelers don't trade up, do they get to 17 with a choice between those two guys? Do they get to choose between Broderick Jones? Seems like they really had reason to think Broderick Jones wasn't going to be there, and so then it's a question of, who's higher on your board, and it seems like it was that simple because there was just so few teams between where they ended up trading and where 17 was.
We may end up seeing a little run on corners coming up here.
That was going to be took the words right out of my mouth, Joe. I think another name that you and I might feel that Christian Gonzalez is the guy we're going to be comparing to, but I think a lot of Steelers fans tonight are going to be sitting there saying, we're going to compare Broderick Jones to Joey Porter Jr.'s career as well. I know you are hopeful he could fall to 32, and I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. But let's just say that he has a first-round grade. I think he's probably going to go. If that's the case, how do you feel about not getting him either?
I'd be okay with Deonte Banks. I mean, at this point, it seemed to me that Witherspoon and Gonzalez were your top two corners, right? So now it would appear there's about a half dozen guys in the same basket. And quite frankly, I'm not going to sit here and break these guys down like I can compare Julius Brents of Kansas State to Deonte Banks of Maryland. I have to rely on what all this pre-draft analysis tells me, that whether it's Porter, Banks, whoever it might be in this next group of 5-6 corners, they're all sort of the same batch, and they're all a notch below Gonzalez and Witherspoon. I'd be okay with one of these guys. Would have preferred to do what Jerry Dulac laid out in the Post-Gazette today as what he thought the Steelers would do, which was trade up to get Gonzalez. Instead, you had a team trade back to get Gonzalez and take a 4th-round pick from the Steelers in the process.
I think Julius Brents is a name that is now high on my radar, Joe, because I'm gonna expect that Joey Porter is going to be gone. I think Deonte Banks is going to be a marginal situation. Does he go somewhere in the 20s? I wouldn't be surprised if he was. I think there was a lot of respect for him, in these final mocks, because if you guys don't follow it, I do our weekly mock draft trackers on postgazette.com, and I try to through draft season say who's rising, who's falling. Deonte Banks is a guy who rose. He was a 2nd round guy in most mocks at the beginning of the draft season, and ended up kind of creeping into that 1st round. So I wouldn't be surprised if they're both gone. So I think that leads you to Julius Brents, especially now that Emmanuel Forbes is off the board. But with that, Joe, I want to welcome in to our chat. Andrew Destin is here. Andrew Destin was our Penn State beat reporter this past season, watched a lot of Big Ten football, so he knows Joey Porter, he knows Deonte Banks, a lot of these names we're talking about. While he's a huge college football fan, does great work on the Pirates and Penguins for us. Now, Andrew, how are you?
Doing well, Adam. I gotta say, really emotionally invested tonight with the Niners not having a pick, but keeping my best here for the faithful fans here in Pittsburgh and keeping tabs. And can't say I'm not got my eyes glued on the television set. So here we are.
Andrew, headline: what's your reaction to the Broderick Jones pick? We've been talking a lot about these cornerbacks that they've decided to pass on to get Broderick Jones. How do you look at that situation?
Yeah, there's a lot of things to unwrap here. And the first would be, Joey Porter Jr. fell to a degree that, I kind of expected. This was something you and I talked about, and I've mentioned with some of my other colleagues as well, was that I kind of anticipated him to be somebody who might fall lower than people expected because the statistics at Penn State maybe didn't back it up his senior year. There were some concerns about pass interferences his junior season. So I wasn't surprised to see him fall lower. I know a lot of people expected him to have that natural pairing with the Steelers. Was a little surprised to see them pass on Gonzalez, but it's really hard to hate on the pick. With Broderick Jones, this is a guy who you can really pencil in there as a left tackle for a decade, assuming all goes to plan. You need to improve the running game. You need to protect your hopeful franchise quarterback. I really have no issue with the pick. I think it's exactly what you need to be doing if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers. Don't know that I would have traded up to get that guy. I think there's a potential that you could have waited a little bit. I know there's talk about the Jets were right there waiting to snag him as well, but I don't know that I would have been moving such a lateral move like that where it comes at the expense of another draft pick, especially when you could have gotten another impact guy like Gonzalez. So a lot to unwrap there. Overall, a good pick, but there are things that are worthy of being nitpicked at, and I think you guys are hitting the nail on the head with all that.
Andrew, I think with your Penn State expertise, I got to talk about your classmate, right? Will Levis. You were in school with him. He is falling down this draft board. What is your read on that situation?
Yeah, also, I hate to say for his sake, but another one I'm not terribly surprised by. I think if this was a draft that didn't have Anthony Richardson in it, maybe we would have seen Will Levis go higher just based on all those athletic traits, everything that he possesses in terms of arm talent, running ability, physique. But when you have, in my opinion, a better, more projectable version in a guy like Richardson, Levis becomes less of a hot commodity. And with teams that really were quarterback dependent or in need higher up in the draft, teams that traded higher up, there wasn't that need for four guys. We've seen that in prior drafts. You go back to 2017 or 2018 when you had the Sam Darnold draft as well as Josh Rosen and all those guys. There was that need within the top 10 where teams were willing to wheel and deal to get themselves just to get any quarterback. I don't think we're quite seeing that to the same degree, and I'm not surprised with Levis just because of the inconsistencies that he's shown in his game and the fact that you have somebody who is similar to him, but in a lot of ways checks off a lot of boxes, or at least is a better, more not polished version, but more projectable and more athletic version of him.
The Levis situation's getting very uncomfortable. His girlfriend is fake singing to act like they're all not worried about this, that everything's fine. He's talking to his mom as if everything's fine. It's absolutely horrifying to see these. It's like remember the Aaron Rodgers draft?
Oh, yeah.
You just feel uncomfortable watching it, and they're trying to hide their discomfort. He's plummeting like a stone in water through the first round, and they have to act like it's not bothering them. Hi, Andrew. Yeah. We've never met.
Pleasure to meet you over the Skype. Fun to meet you, Joe. And I remember that day very well. I was young, but I was gifted an Alex Smith jersey for Christmas that year, and that was not what I wanted. Would have wanted an Aaron Rodgers jersey, but here we are.
Jack Campbell. Wow, that is Steelers. Listen, I'm talking to our YouTube audience, and no one carried the torch more for Jack Campbell to the Steelers than our Post-Gazette YouTube viewers. So I think there's a lot of heartbreak out there among you guys watching because, man, he wasn't even on the radar for me, and you guys brought him onto the radar. And I think you guys ended up having the right read because now here he goes at number 18. I think a lot of people were talking about him as maybe a third-round pick, a guy that the Steelers could consider, around that 80th pick. He is now off the board at, 18? Joe, what do you think of that?
He'd look good on the Steelers. I'll tell you that much, man. And they still don't have that guy at inside linebacker. They don't. This guy would look great. I mean, they're just filling that hole every year with different guys. Now they got a guy in Holcomb coming off foot surgery. Elandon Roberts, sort of a one-trick pony. They're both sort of the same ilk anyway. Mark Robinson's not that guy. They need a quarterback of their defense. Mike Tomlin's top 3 picks, his highest 3 picks of all time before this year anyway, were inside linebackers. They greatly value this position. I don't think it was on a lot of people's radar this year, but at some point they're going to need, a guy at the epicenter of their defense right in the middle. They've always had one, and I'm not sure these free agent fill-ins this year are the answer. So I'm intrigued by this pick.
Yeah, I'm very intrigued as well. Andrew, you are our resident Big Ten guy. I mean, I don't know. I watch a lot of Big Ten football. I went to Penn State too, so I can't lie. But you're watching on a professional level. I'm usually watching with a drink in my hand. What do you think of this Jack Campbell pick?
Well, I can speak to this. I wasn't somebody who went to every Iowa football game, but I was at the one in 2021, Penn State, Iowa. Got the chance to cover that one, and Campbell was somebody I watched a lot of tape on back in my play-by-play broadcasting days. He was somebody who popped off the tape and remained to do so again in his senior campaign. Dude checks off so many boxes for me. And not just that, the physical traits, his ability to move at that frame, and what he could do in terms of generating takeaways. I mean, you say whatever you want about Iowa last year, that the defense created more touchdowns than their offense did at times, that, they were their best form of scoring, all those sorts of things. There's a reason to that. It's because you had Jack Campbell on that defense. Kirk Ferentz, I don't know that he's coaching up very many good offenses these days, but Campbell at 6'5", I know the NFL Draft Combine, the stats didn't really back it up in terms of how mobile he really is at that size. This is more of a throwback pick. I mean, this is a guy who, if you put him in 1980s football, would truly excel and probably would be an even more coveted commodity, but he still has a ton of value in today's game. And I think placing him right there in that Lions defense, like the pick a lot. I had his hunch he would go at this kind of range here in the draft, and I think it's a perfect pick for Detroit.
Chris Carter is back with us. Chris, any additional thoughts on not just Broderick Jones, but the way the draft has proceeded since Christian Gonzalez obviously is, I think, the biggest name from the Steelers' perspective going off the board? What are your thoughts?
I got to get back to work because Kalijah Cansey is the Bucs pick at 19 overall.
Wow, there we go. He's in and out, folks. He was here.
I'll be back again, boys.
I'm going to jump in here, and this is another guy that I'll be interested to track, unfair as it might seem, with Broderick Jones, because I feel like defensive line, other than quarterback, the common denominator with most Super Bowl champions is they have up front defensively people who can destroy you, whether that was the Bucs against Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Donald. We saw when the Patriots had their unbeaten season wrecked, it was because the Giants had 7 guys up front defensively who could just kill you, and you can't have enough of them. And I think that Cansey has it. The unfair part of this is you always hear people say, well, he's like Aaron Donald. He's never going to be Aaron Donald. Well, who cares? Nobody in the history of the league has been Aaron Donald.
ESPN right now is flashing NFL comparison Aaron Donald. They just had the graphic with both of them, and you don't think that's fair? Like, I mean, I agree with you. I don't think it's fair to hold him to that standard. If you want to talk about stature,
because people accompany it with, well, there's no way he's going to be Aaron Donald. Obviously, stature-wise, it's an easy comparison. My point is, I don't care if he's Aaron Donald. He's going to be a great NFL player. Not a good one, a great one. And he would look good. I realize the Steelers can't have everybody, but he would have looked great as especially the 32nd pick for them.
Man, they just flashed the numbers up on the screen, Joe, just very similar size, very similar 40 times. I'm not surprised to see him go here. I think he's going to have a great NFL career.
I love that guy. I think that's one of the best picks in this draft right now.
Especially for Tampa Bay, given that they're in this period of reloading, I think that's a great pick for them. Andrew, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I'd second everything that Joe said, and somebody that I didn't get to watch a ton of this year, other than highlight reels and getting to keep up with the coverage through our buddies Chris and Noah. I mean, this is a guy that they're seemingly writing about every week. It felt like. Just what he did at his size, what he did for that defense. And I think another point that I love to bring up with Pat Narduzzi, and I know Penn State people won't love this, but in terms of developing defensive guys, I know there's that track record with what he does with cornerbacks and playing a lot of, single man-to-man coverage with them and how that helps develop them to get ready for the next level. There's a track record across the board, and it's really hard to pick against or critique a pick of a Pitt defensive player really in any capacity. So I like this pick in that regard, just because I think the track record speaks for itself. Deuce is a defensive-minded coach, and this guy obviously had the production to back up being this type of pick. Maybe a little bit higher than we expected, but yeah, I can't hate on that. I think it's the right move for Tampa.
Guys, James in the chat has been champing at the bit for us to talk about the receivers, because I think this is a very strange draft in the sense that I don't think there's any receivers off the board yet. Smith and Jigba is still out there. Jordan Addison is still out there. Zay Flowers is still out there. What do you guys think of that in today's NFL? We talk all the time. This is a passing league. I think this year we saw, with the teams that were really good, the Eagles, the 49ers, they were great run-first teams. They had guys that, even if they were receivers, they could run the ball as well. Is what we're seeing here with these receivers dropping down the board a reflection of maybe a movement back toward the run, or is it a matter of maybe this is just not a great draft for receivers?
I'd go with the latter. I'm not saying not a great draft for receivers, not a great draft to get that guy. There's no Jamar Chase in this draft. There's not. So I think people believe the same thing with receivers that they do actually with running backs. Is if you don't get an absolute stud, then there's a bunch of guys that you can wait on, and they'll all be in sort of, the same batch, the same talent level. So I don't think that there's a Jamar Chase type guy, a Justin Jefferson type guy in this draft. I think people believe you can get high quality receivers later on. They can wait. Smith and Jigba goes off the board. I think a lot of teams, so what? I'll get a guy later.
Andrew, one guy I wanted to bring up, because I've talked a lot about some of these guys who were very productive in college. I think that's kind of what Joe's alluding to, is that there's guys that are in that third, fourth round grade type of territory. Charlie Jones, I think, is one that comes to mind from Purdue. You saw him up close. Dell from Houston is another name that I think he scored 17 touchdowns for the Cougars. Where do you come down on this? Is it just a reflection of it? Yeah, there's good receivers in this draft. They're just not those stud type guys.
Yeah, and think it comes down to body type, really. And listen, it's going to be Jackson Smith-Njigba is probably going to be a very productive, slot receiver for a long time in the NFL, or however long. I'm not one to be a predictor in that regard, but there's just a plethora of guys who can get you what you want out of a number 3, number 2 receiving option. But the only guy that really jumps off the board to me in terms of having that body size is a Quentin Johnson, maybe out of TCU, just given his frame and his production. But there's questions about his route running ability. If you were to pair his ball skills and route running, if you were to bring that to the same degree as any of these, smaller sized receivers who are being pegged as first round talents or early second round talents, stuff like that, then yeah, you'd have somebody who maybe has the makeup of a Jamar Chase. But the reality is there's so many dudes coming off the boards who are dime a dozen types, and that's not to diminish their production or their ability to succeed at the NFL level. But if you're going to spend a first-round pick on a receiver, it better be a guy that you think can be a wide receiver 1. And I don't know that there's anybody really that jumps off the page to me that you really think that. I mean, there are so many people who have said Jackson Smith-Njigba, for instance. He's not a wide receiver 1. He wasn't a wide receiver number 1 at Ohio State, which obviously goes to show the talent that they had there. But I think it's all just to say that there's a lot of good options out there. And to Joe's point, you have plenty of time. You don't need to rush for it. And if one guy gets picked off the board, so what? There's another 7 waiting there in the wings.
We're going to get interrupted by Seattle's pick here shortly. They're really winding the clock down here at 37 seconds. But, Joe, I want to ask what you think about that graphic they were just flashing. They've been doing it for the last few picks with Will Levis. They said 1.8% chance he was available at 19, 1.1% chance he was available at 20. What do you think of listen, I like analytics. How do they know? How can you say there was a 1% chance he'd be here?
Well, there was the Reddit story the other day that changed odds at major sports books from there's no chance this guy will go number 1 to wow, there's a decent chance he'll go number 1. I don't know what to make of those percentages. I think every mock draft I read, every expert I heard thought that Will Levis would be gone long before now. I know that.
Yeah, I don't know I don't know how that's something you analytic, I guess, is my kind. You don't know what teams' boards are, right? Analytics are for things to me that happen on the field. I don't know how you can throw that out there for a situation like this, Andrew.
Yeah, no, couldn't agree with you more there. It's just not the time for it. I mean, listen, I'll throw analytics into my writing or in my research as much as anybody, but this is not the time and place for that.
Adam, I have to go now.
No problem, Joe. Thanks for stopping by. Before you go, I just want to tease for everyone, Brian Batko will be here shortly. He is at the Steelers facility. Omar Khan, Mike Tomlin are speaking now, so he will be on here shortly. Joe, thanks for stopping by. Any final thoughts?
They better get a corner at 32. That's my final thought. I said this earlier. Mike Tomlin said there's no glaring needs. Do you guys agree with me? Have I lost my mind? I look at this roster. And the word glaring should be over the fact that they don't have a number one corner in a passing league. They're going to go against Jamar Chase twice. Lamar Jackson just re-signed. They're going to fortify his weapons in Baltimore. Amari Cooper tore this team apart last year with Jacoby Brissett throwing him the ball. Not to mention they got Trevor Lawrence and all kinds of people here. They don't have a number one corner. Do you agree? Am I crazy?
No, I don't think you're crazy, Joe. I think, to me, there's the important thing is I think there are still guys with number one upside out there, and I think the further we go into this, the more you wonder, are we done tonight for the Steelers? Because the more of those corners drop, if they're down to 25, Joe, I think you have to go up and get them.
I still think they may be able to get one at 30. I think Joey Porter might drop. What do you think, Andrew? Do they need a number one corner?
Yeah, no, they absolutely do. And I think your point's a valid one. Joey might drop. I mean, we've seen the way that this draft has progressed so far. Yeah, there's a couple of big name guys that were pegged as top talents already off the board, but there's time. I don't know that you need to trade up, but it's absolutely something that needs to be addressed. I mean, I think with Sutton leaving in free agency, it's a given. And, you know, you can say that about a lot of teams. I'm honestly pretty shocked the way this draft has progressed, but it's something they got to address. And I think they're going to have to. But I think to your point, I don't know that they need to trade up. I think hanging pat at 32, at least for now, kind of see how the next few picks shake out, but looking good on my end.
There goes Jackson Smith and Jigba, and there goes Joe Starkey. Joe, thanks for stopping by, and we really appreciate it.
See you guys.
Bye,
Great
Joe.
stuff. Thanks for having me, man. See ya.
No problem. All right. It's just me and Andrew. Like I said, Brian Batko will be back. I think Christopher Carter might be back at some point, but he's got to do this Kalijah Cansey reporting, so there's that as well. What do you think of Jackson Smith and Jigba going at 20 here, Andrew? I think that's well below where I think a lot of us expected him to go as well.
Yeah, it's well below, but it's also a really good fit for the Seahawks. And I think, this has probably been written to in oblivion, but just the natural pairing there is a guy who can kind of model what Tyler Lockett's done for years there, learn under him and fill that void eventually when Lockett goes. I mean, it's just a natural pairing. I think it's a good pick for the Seahawks. Surprised it took this long, but with the way this receivers class has shaken out, there's a reason these guys are falling. It's because they're not as hot commodities as, maybe we would have thought, earlier in this offseason.
Brian Batko is here, folks. Brian, I'm going to go refresh my glass. I'm getting a little parched here. So I'm going to set you up and let you go. Broderick Jones as the guy trading up to get him. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. I think to me, we just the reason I'm a little late jumping on here, we just heard from first Broderick Jones on a conference call, and he said all the typical stuff from a new draft pick in the NFL. He's excited to get to it. He feels like he's at home. He's pumped to be a Steeler. Kenny Pickett's a dog. Najee Harris is a dog. So, nothing earth-shattering there. But, we also just met with Omar Khan and Mike Tomlin. And the big takeaway for me, Andrew, Adam, wherever you are, dear listeners, I think this is just another example of Omar Khan bringing a little bit of a different flavor to this whole thing. And obviously Kevin Colbert has made his moves up on the draft board from time to time. And, the last time they did it in 19, it really didn't work out with the Devin Bush pick at 10 overall. But I think Omar Khan is going to be looking for the market inefficiencies, to the nickel and dime approach a little bit. That's kind of exactly what they did tonight. If draft pick trading and first round positioning were a baseball game, they were playing small ball. They were hitting singles and bunting people over, and they move up just 3 spots from 17 to 14 to jump 2 teams. Well, we don't know how many teams, but Khan and Tomlin essentially said they figured some of the teams in front of them might want to tackle. And obviously Broderick Jones, the last guy left in that top tier of tackles. So they surveyed the board. They made the quick call to the Patriots, and obviously they made it happen pretty quickly. So Tomlin even, uncharacteristic for him, guys, admitted, whatever you want to say, that they weren't willing to part with anything more than a day 3 pick. So that meant that as they were negotiating with teams, at least according to what the Steelers said publicly, they were not doing a deal that included number 32. They were not dangling 49. They weren't even messing around with pick 80 in the third round. So we still could be plenty busy here in the next couple, the next 48 hours. But yeah, I mean, they just kind of went for a more conservative approach at it. They didn't, try to make this big swing or big move. And, they get the guy that they wanted at a spot they felt comfortable with.
Brian, speaking of being busy in the next 48 hours, I'm going to ask you about the next hour. I mean, there are still corners on this board that we've talked, you and I have talked a lot about on the mock draft tracker videos.
Yeah, and you'll have to fill me in a little, Adam, because as we're doing this, obviously I missed several picks. So, keep me informed a little bit.
Yeah, Joey Porter still on the board. Deontay Banks still on the board.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah, and obviously Julius Brents is as well.
Jordan Addison? I know he's not a corner, but
Jordan Addison is still on the board.
Okay.
So it's Jackson Smith and Jigba is the guy who just went to Seattle at 20.
Okay, yeah. When I came on, Andrew was talking about the Seahawks drafting a receiver. I wasn't sure if it was Addison or who, but okay, yeah. I mean, that's good to know who else is there. And I'll say this much too, guys, from being in that room, I got a feeling that they are still working the phones. And then that goes back to my original point here that I think Omar Khan is, he's been doing this for a long time. He's extremely experienced in the NFL. He's never been a GM before, but obviously he's been a right-hand man type of guy. And yet, if you know anything about kind of his origin story, Ray Fittipaldo wrote about it last year when he was hired as the GM. He kind of came up more like me and you. I mean, he was kind of looking at the NFL from an outsider perspective rather than big X's and O's, scouting, doing it the old school way. So I think he's not completely a 17-year-old kid on Madden trying to force through trades, but I think he is looking at it from that approach a little bit more. He was even asked, are you more aggressive than people thought? And he shrugged it off and said he just wants to try to win a Super Bowl. And Mike Tomlin interjected and said, yeah, he's aggressive.
I mean, so I'm going to pull at this thread a little bit more with you, Brian. Did you got the sense that they felt like maybe they're done, and maybe they think that this is if the draft ends tonight and they have Broderick Jones at the end of round one, they still have 32 and 49 tomorrow. Great, but did you get the sense that it's still possible?
I think it is still possible, and that's my bottom line here is that I think that just about anything is possible with Khan. I think he's looking to extract as much value as he can out of basically every pick and every piece of draft capital available to him. I think that's also a philosophy that comes from Philadelphia too, with Howie Roseman as their GM. They have similar backgrounds, Khan and Roseman do. Andy Weidel, I don't know how involved he is in some of those aspects of GMing, but he came from that front office, so he's at least seen how it can go down. So to answer your question, Adam, yeah, I just wouldn't roll out much of anything. I get a little bit of pause from Mike Tomlin saying they didn't want to move any of those day 3 picks to make this trade. But yeah, I mean, we know that number 32 pick is more valuable even than a trade chart would tell you, because you get a whole night and morning and afternoon cycle to take a step back, meet with your scouts again, look at the board, what positions had a run, what positions didn't get picked over, why is this player falling, do we need to take another look at him? Omar Khan said that even just earlier this week, they kind of went back over it again and decided that, Broderick Jones was special enough to make a deal like this. So, yeah, I won't say that there's going to be another Steelers pick tonight. I wouldn't predict that, but I just say the more we learn about the Omar Khan tenure as Steelers GM, the less we know, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Just to update everyone, if you're not watching live, Quentin Johnson, the TCU wide receiver, goes to who just picked? I just missed it. I just blanked on the team. San Diego. It was San Diego at 21. Baltimore is now on the clock at 22.
It's always interesting to see what the Ravens do, guys.
Yeah. So what do you think? Let me ask you both about that. I guess I'll start with Andrew. What do you think the Ravens need? And I guess the smaller context is it a cornerback?
Yeah, I mean, you have to, it comes to mind, right? I mean, that's something that's definitely a topic of discussion here. Especially you mentioned it so many times, everybody else has, with this division, what it presents in terms of the offensive capabilities of these quarterbacks and these offenses that these other teams possess. It comes to mind, and there's still so many good options available. To me, it's a logical choice. That's what I'd be doing here if I was the Ravens. But curious from your perspective, Brian, as somebody who covers this stuff for a living, what are you thinking here out of the Ravens?
Yeah, I mean, in my mock draft that I did for the Post-Gazette this week, and also that was separate from the mock. I guess it was kind of the same. I did have the Steelers picking Broderick Jones. I don't know. I told Chris to shout me out on the page earlier when that pick was made. I don't know if he did, but I'll give myself a minor pat on the back because let's be honest, it was just a guess, but happy about that. I have the Ravens taking Brian Brzee from Clemson, and not necessarily because I think it's a sneaky need for them. They did lose Calais Campbell, but I think they value those big people on the defensive line kind of the same way the Steelers do, right? We've been over this year after year, draft after draft. They always seem to be after the same prospects. It would be the most fascinating, obviously, if they picked Joey Porter Jr. The storylines would be endless, but I'll stick with that original pick and say that a guy like Brzee, the big thing you don't know about him is what's the medical history? What do teams see in his injury track record? Will it give them pause? If it doesn't, I think he fits what the Ravens want to do up front.
Brian, I got to ask you, I think about the big headline of the draft overall, not just from a Steelers perspective. Will Levis is still on the board. What do you think of him falling this far? And like a lot of these teams coming up, I don't know who's going to want him necessarily. I mean, I guess I could see a fit with the Ravens if they hadn't just spent an NFL record contract today on Lamar Jackson.
So much weird buzz around the quarterbacks in the draft this year. It's always that way, yes, but last year it was, I think, less so just because it wasn't as high it wasn't as high leverage, because I think the general consensus was, that class didn't have the top 5 pick type of quarterbacks. If you're a Kenny Pickett fan, forget I said that, and whatever. Hey, maybe he'll turn out to be that guy, but sitting where we were this time a year ago, nobody was projecting that for the most part. This year was different. Nobody really knew what the flavor was going to be for the Texans at 2, or if they were even going to go QB at all. You heard some people say that Levis is the sneaky favorite of a lot of NFL teams because of his working with a Rams Sean McVay disciple with Kentucky's offense. Obviously the measurables, the big arm. Andrew knows all about that stuff, having covered his Penn State recruitment in early time. Maybe you guys already discussed it, but other people said, no, he's not even going to be in the same realm as the other 3. And that's proving to be correct. Now what I'm really curious is, does a team that maybe nobody's talking or thinking about make that kind of classic Ravens move that they did with Lamar and just sneak into the last 2 or 3 picks of the first round so you can get the 5th-year option on Levis and either roll with him as your immediate starter or project him down the line and kind of use that first season as a bonus year.
Brian, we've kind of, me and Andrew have both been on the stream, so all we're really talking, the only reaction I've really gotten is from the 3 of us when Joe was on here earlier, a little bit of Chris, and obviously the people in the chat.
What did Joe think of Broderick Jones?
Joe said safe. Basically safe is the word.
Safe, but they haven't picked a tackle in the first round since 1996? Jermaine Stevens. I mean, that was the ultimate, boom or bust pick, and he busted about as hard as you can. So not safe by the Steelers' history, but I know what Starkey's saying there.
Yeah, but he's beating the drum for a corner and possibly trading back in. Or, the name we keep bringing up is Julius Brents, and I really start to wonder if that's kind of the fallback at this point, is if you can get him at 32. Or maybe they have a better read too. Maybe he's going to be at 49. I don't know.
I'll say this. I'm not even convinced, now that they didn't do it in the first round, I'm not even convinced that they'll take an outside corner in this draft. I mean, the cornerback position in modern football is a lot different than it looks on paper in a depth chart, right? Like, you've got some corners like a Julius Brents, like a Joey Porter Jr. I highly doubt that guy's ever going to play in the slot and try to cover inside receivers. I mean, you want him on it's like having a 6'5" wideout. You want him on the outside for the most part to win, down the sideline. That's what their skill sets are. the Steelers might feel like they're good there with Levi Wallace, Patrick Peterson, and then, your mileage may vary on James Pierre and Akello Witherspoon, but for all we know, the Steelers might think, look, if we're going to take a corner wherever it is, 32, 49, 80, they don't have 120 anymore. Update your mocks. But if we're going to take one of those guys, then we need a slot who can cover. We need somebody who can be that nickel starter. I mean, it really is a starter in today's football. They play 5 defensive back package more than anything else. So maybe you see them go away from all of those types, the Brents, the Porters, who else in this draft? I guess Gonzalez, he's gone now, but maybe they don't go that route at all. Maybe they are eyeing a type like a Clark Phillips III from Utah. I know Ray Fittipaldo had Travius Hodges-Tomlinson in his mock draft because he's another very small but inside type of player. They've got a lot of options with what they can do at corner. And the other wild card, I think, is just D-line. Is there a guy that they feel like can elevate that unit right now, still left in the draft?
You set me up well. The other name, we haven't talked about him in a little bit, but he is, I think, it's hard to say whether he's dropping like a rock because I think he always had kind of the most variable stock, but that is Nolan Smith from Georgia. Andrew, I'm going to interrupt you probably here in a second with the Ravens pick, but let's just wait before I ask. I want to talk about
Nolan Smith didn't get picked yet?
No, Nolan Smith
wow.
is still on the board.
That is surprising to me. The other one, guys, you probably discussed it on here because he's a pet favorite of yours, Adam, but Jack Campbell going 18th overall floored us in the media room. And, we didn't have much time to discuss it as a collective Steelers beat because we were doing the Broderick Jones thing, but wow, that was out of nowhere.
Yeah, no, we all had the same reaction. He wasn't my guy. He was YouTube's guy. All these people that are watching us right now loved Jack Campbell, so they're upset about that. I will update you all. Zay Flowers is the pick at number 22 for Baltimore. He's a guy that we ended up talking about for the Steelers. He was on Mel Kiper. I think he was a Mel Kiper pick late in the process, way off the board. He ends up going to Baltimore. What do you guys think of that?
Go ahead, Andrew.
Oh, yeah. No, definitely a fan of that pick. I mean, I like him, honestly, better than Quentin Johnson. I mean, the critiques I had of him, I already made pretty clear to you, Adam, but talking about him, Brian, I mean, my problem with Johnson was just that, yeah, he's a big body receiver, but not somebody who is a great route runner and not somebody who has the ball skills that is desired in today's NFL, obviously. But with Flowers, I think this is somebody that, given what the Ravens have with their receiving core, probably would have liked a little bit more by this point in time with Rashad Bateman. I mean, I think this is a guy who fits in perfectly with so many of these other slot receivers that have been pegged at this point in the draft. Your Jordan Addisons, guys who really are, interchangeable parts. I think Flowers, at his size, his route running ability, I think he fits perfectly with this offense and helps provide another security blanket, which we all know how well or how much we know that Lamar Jackson loves Mark Andrews. I think this is a perfect fit as another guy that he can kind of rely on day in and day out for those intermediate pickups.
Yeah, and now it just dovetails with what I was just discussing. Zay Flowers, I think he could do a lot of different things. I think he mostly projects as an inside receiver in the NFL at his, diminutive size. He's not much bigger than Calvin Austin, the third, who the Steelers drafted last year in the 4th round. And if you remember, there was that little anecdote from, might have been Peter King, who said the Ravens were really unhappy when the Steelers snagged Calvin Austin right before one of their picks last year. So now they go out and get that type of receiver, I guess, that they were looking for. Zay Flowers considered a better prospect, of course, than Austin was. He's a little bulkier, I think, and was certainly more productive at a higher level in the ACC. But now the Steelers got to figure out a way to, contend with every team in this division. It's not going to be easy. Obviously, everybody's pie in the sky on draft night. You're happy about everything. You got your guy, woo. But earlier today, Ravens inked Lamar Jackson to the long-term extension. Of course, inevitably there will be somebody saying that's good news for the Steelers. Joe Burrow and the Bengals aren't going anywhere. They're going to have a pick later tonight that could bolster their roster. The Browns with Deshaun Watson, they could be dangerous if they figure things out. So as it pertains to just this pick by the Ravens, who are the Steelers going to get to cover those shifty, dynamic slot receivers, not only in this division but across the NFL? Flowers is certainly one of those guys.
Andrew, I want to get back to what I was mentioning before, the Nolan Smith dropping, or depending upon what mock draft you looked at, maybe he's right in his correct range. But I think Will Levis is the big story for me. Nolan Smith is the only other guy on the board that I really thought could go really high, and he didn't. What do you think of his standing right now as we're at pick 23? Is he a guy that one of these teams should want to have that fifth-year option on?
Yeah, I mean, he's somebody. I mean, it's interesting you bring him up because I had, friends who were messaging me saying that he was somebody the Steelers should have been looking at with the original pick before they traded it. I mean, that was somebody who seemed like a very legitimate name there, just given the needs, what they needed there in terms of the offensive line as well as linebacker and cornerback. That was arguably one of their top 3 biggest needs. To see him free fall like this, a little bit of a surprise, definitely not to the degree of Levis, but I think he kind of gets a bad rap, and a lot of players in that Georgia defense did last year just because the precedent from the year before that was set on that group was so high that, their decrease in turnovers generated, their decreased productivity in every facet really as a defense. I think that kind of hampered a lot of these guys, and Nolan Smith is still very much a first-round talent in my mind. I think he's somebody who could be targeted here, but with the free fall right now, there's no telling when this is going to stop, and I think this is just me as the college football guy speaking out loud here, but it's kind of a mistake, I think, to pick against the guys who were pegged as some of the best prospects coming out of high school and played for a team that won back-to-back national championships. I think there's something to be said about that.
I was just going to say, Andrew, that leads me into I'm going to make my final point here and then maybe tag in Ray Fittipaldo for his analysis because, he's the O-line technician guru here. And I think he has liked Broderick Jones all along, if I'm not mistaken. He liked him better than Paris Johnson Jr. So I'll be curious if Ray can get over here too and give you guys some thoughts from the draft headquarters. But to your point, Andrew, Mike Tomlin also brought that up that they obviously they're trying to build a winning culture here with the Steelers, and they're one of the winningest organizations in the history of pro football. The results haven't been where they want to be lately, but they're trying to get back to that. And he said that they were so impressed by Broderick Jones and what he was able to do for that Georgia team, the run they've been on, not just last year, but the last 2 years going back-to-back national champions. And Tomlin made a point that not only did he appreciate what they were able to do on the field, but, Broderick Jones and the way he fit into that culture overall, you don't necessarily know if you understand what it takes to win until you're in it. So they seem to be placing a lot of value on that as well with this pick. Maybe that's just coach speak on draft night, and you're going to say that when you take a guy from a good team. But I think that matters to them. Maybe that's something to keep an eye on for these future picks. If you're projecting the Steelers to take a guy from a 3-9 team, if there's a tiebreaker with a guy who played for a 10-2 team, maybe that's also something that is being weighed more heavily this season, as they try to get back to the playoffs.
Well, Brian, we will let you go. Thank you for joining us. I think everyone appreciates your insight from Steelers headquarters. Obviously, we mentioned it earlier, but it bears repeating. Make sure you're subscribed to postgazette.com. I think the link is down in the description, $6 for 6 months of access. Everything Ray's writing, everything Brian's writing, everything Jerry Dulac is writing. He's also working hard on I think he has our main bar draft story tonight, Brian. So
he does. He's typing away up there. I typed mine on Monday when I had the Steelers trading up to 12 to take Broderick Jones. Deepest apologies there that I really botched the deal. So what are you going to do?
Well, hey, Brian, thanks for stopping by, and we'll tag in Ray Fittipaldo here shortly. He is also down at Steelers headquarters, and he's going to join when he is available.
All right. I'll try to track him down, guys. Thanks.
Sounds good. Bye, Brian.
Good talking, Brian.
All right. The pick is in for Minnesota. Andrew, what are you thinking here? The number one top 5 Mel Kiper guys on the board are Will Levis, Nolan Smith, who we just talked about, Dalton Kincaid, Deontay Banks, and Jordan Addison. I think 3 of those 5 guys are very interesting from a Steelers perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think for the Vikings right here, Deontay Banks is the guy I'd go with. Cornerback's a need. That's a spot that I look to there. I don't know. Seems like a logical pick there for Minnesota. Don't know that I'd be going with Levis. You got Cousins, who I guess they feel pretty good about. I know a lot of other people maybe feel differently, but that's the direction I'd be going, is probably address the cornerback needs.
Where is Will Levis? I'm gonna let I'm going to let you talk, Andrew. Where does Will Levis go now? I mean, we got what? We're in Minnesota now. Jacksonville obviously has Trevor Lawrence. The Giants, I mean, I guess I could see them not feeling great about Daniel Jones, but didn't they just give him a new deal?
Yeah, a deal that I don't love, but they gave him one that shows some degree of confidence. No, I mean, that signifies that to at least that. I look, obviously the Cowboys very content with Prescott. No for the next two picks. The only one that really would make sense there maybe is New Orleans, but they've obviously shown the direction that they want to with free agency over the offseason. I don't know. That's the only one that would make sense to me. Otherwise, we're seeing this guy fall out of the first round, which to me is the right call. I mean, you and I have followed this guy's career as much as anybody. I think this is logical. I think this is not falling into the draft hype. And when you had a better version of him and Anthony Richardson, you go with it. And you don't need to try and pull for a draft prospect and somebody who's projectable. Just go with the one who is and has those physical tools.
Andrew, how do you balance? I mean, I think you're leading into it. Well, let's hold on here. Minnesota is picking now. I guess we can chew on this pick before I ask this question because it might render the question irrelevant. It is Jordan Addison, the former Pitt receiver, former Biletnikoff winner. I'll get into the question I had for you in a second, Andrew. Let's chew through that one. Jordan Addison, Justin Jefferson, same receiving core. What do you think of that?
Yeah, it pairs well nicely with him, and that just kind of goes back to our point that we've been making all night, is that any team that's going to take a receiver in the first round, it's going to be as a projected number 2. It's obvious that Justin Jefferson's the one there. He's the bigger body. He's the number 1 receiver. You pair Addison as the slot guy / number 2 receiving option. Makes sense to me. I think it's a good pick. You're trying to provide Cousins with more offensive weapons. There's still criticisms that are valid ones of whether or not he is the right guy there at quarterback, but the least you can do if you're giving him the financial investment that they have is provide him another receiving option. And I mean, we saw what Addison did with really good quarterback play the last 2 years. Obviously, this season hampered by injuries when he was at USC, but with Williams, with Pickett, he produced. He's a guy who's an NFL day one guy, and we're seeing that reflected here. And I think that pairs well. That's a pretty good landing spot for him there.
They're showing a lot of Pitt film here, Andrew. Now we're getting into the USC film. Just because there's a lot of Pitt fans here, and we might as well talk about from a Pitt perspective as well. Did Jordan Addison make a mistake going to Southern Cal? Would he have been picked higher, or do you think that this is where he was always destined to go?
This was where he was always destined to go. I guess you could make the argument that he maybe could have boosted his stock a little bit, but that only would have been if he was healthy and had better numbers at USC. I don't think there was anything he was going to do in the Pitt offense, the direction that it was going. With moving on from offensive coordinators, with moving on from Kenny Pickett, it became a run-first offense. That was not going to be the case, regardless if Keaton Levis stays healthy, regardless of what happens there. That was a run-first offense. His numbers were going to go down. He got the NIL money. He chased the bag, and rightfully so. He made sure that he stayed a first-round draft pick as projected. Can't hate on it. It was the right career move for him. Obviously, maybe brought his stock down a little bit just because he wasn't healthy all season and didn't have the gaudy numbers. But yeah, I think this is the right play for him. And, how can you hate on being a first-round draft pick? That probably brings evidence and brings credence to your move.
Yeah, and I mean, we don't know what there's been a lot of speculation about what he got from an NIL perspective when he went to Southern Cal. So if he secured the bag, maybe that's all that matters. If you're Jordan Addison for his last season in college. The question I wanted to get into with you, Andrew, was Deonte Banks versus Joey Porter Jr. These are guys we've talked about endlessly. I think going into tonight, a lot of us felt like Joey Porter Jr. was the number one guy of those two. But now he's out there with Banks as well. If you're the Steelers and I don't know, we're at 24, who are you looking at?
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at both those guys. I really am. I think that Banks provides a lot there in a lot of different facets. I think that Porter Jr., is an intriguing prospect just based on the measurables. I think Banks is probably a more polished corner in a lot of ways. I like both guys there, but then there's also the point to be made that you can still go out and get a Nolan Smith if he falls down to you. So there's a lot of options here. You've probably already addressed your need from the offensive line perspective. Your other two top needs being at those two spots, I think you got options. You got corner, you got middle line or linebacker, excuse me. These are two areas you can address, and you got a lot of wiggle room with here right now.
Ray, can you hear me? Hold on. Oh, I think we just lost Ray. We're working through some technical issues, but you guys saw it. Ray is coming to the screen, so stay tuned. We're going to get his thoughts. He obviously offensive lineman at Holy Cross. I badly want to hear what he has to say about Broderick Jones. So if you're still with us at 11 p.m. on the East Coast, please stay tuned because we've at least got Ray Fittipaldo before we sign off for the night. Andrew, the Giants are up. Okay, here's Ray. Let's get Ray. Let's tag Ray in here. Ray Fittipaldo, how are you?
Good, guys. How you doing tonight?
Great. It is dark down the south side. Unfortunately, they wouldn't give us anywhere for you guys to go in the light, but you're in there. Ray, what do you think of the Broderick Jones pick?
I like it. It addresses a big need for them, and you only have to give up pick 120 to get the guy you want. I think it's terrific. And little side note, it seems like Bill Belichick wanted to maybe put one over on his division rival Jets there, who were also in the market for Broderick Jones. So worked out well for the Steelers. Redshirt sophomore, 21 years old, as Mike Tomlin and Omar Khan said, tons of upside. Now, he's not a finished product yet. He's got to come in and, iron a few things out with his technique. But athletically, size-wise, he's everything you want in a left tackle.
Ray, I want to talk about something we talked about earlier with Joe Starkey, is on the safe and exciting continuum. Where do you put this pick? Is it the high floor type of thing, or is we've had a lot of people talk to him as about he has some work to do. What do you feel about that situation?
Well, he's got a short college resume. He started the final 4 games of the 2021 season, and then of course every game this season. But he played in 2 national championship games, and Mike Tomlin talked about that experience, and he talked about coming from a winner and the expectations of winning here. And Mike Tomlin thought that was a terrific marriage. I mean, if you look at their first round picks over the years, guys, Najee Harris from Alabama, great program. Pitt has had some success lately. They tend to go after the big school guys that have a lot of success in college with the wins and losses. So, is he the safest pick in this draft? I don't think so. I mean, he only has 19 starts on his resume. But I think, the upside, if Pat Meyer can do his thing with him, just hammer him on some of the, the fundamentals. I think he's got great footwork, but, they got to iron some things out with his punch and, just learning the game. But, I think I wouldn't call it the safest pick, but I do think, in time, I think this will turn out to be a very good pick for the Steelers.
Ray, I want to get into that in time portion of what you just said. Is he going to be the starting left tackle on day one? I think that's the question a lot of I shouldn't say day one. I should say opening day. That first game, is he going to be the starting left tackle, or do you think that there is going to have to be some development between here and there?
They're not going to rush it. And with Dan Moore Jr. starting for the last 2 seasons, they don't have to. But I think eventually, at some point during his rookie season, yes, Broderick Jones will be this team's starting left tackle. You don't make a selection midway through the first round at number 17 and have that guy sit the bench the entire season. They're going to want to get his clock started. If there's development to take place, eventually that development has to take place in games against other competition. Let's face it, once the season starts, after training camp, your live reps in practice, you're not getting quality reps against, Cam Hayward or TJ Watt or Alex Highsmith. Those are going to come during training camp. So if he's ready, late August, early September, he'll be the guy. But if he has to still work on a few things, I think it could happen, October, November, but they won't rush it. They got Dan Moore Jr. in place. He can hold that down for however long it has to be held down for.
Ray, I want to get into a little more Jones talk in a minute, but the Giants just took Deonte Banks. So that's another corner off the board. Do you think that you were in the room more recently than Brian was? Did the Steelers give a sense that they're done tonight? With Joey Porter still there, we're at pick 25. Is it possible we see them jump back into that first round to grab him?
Yeah, don't be surprised if they make a move to get back into the first round. I don't know specifically that it would be for Joey Porter, but they are still working the phones. Omar Khan, I don't want to say was in a hurry, but he kind of made note that they wanted to get back to the war room and make a few more calls because they felt like there was a lot that was still left on the table. Now, whether that happens tonight or that happens with picks 32, 49, and 80 tomorrow, we don't know just yet, but don't be surprised if they trade back in here late tonight.
What is your reaction to the way the cornerbacks have gone off the board here? Emmanuel Forbes was obviously taken pretty early. I don't think a lot of us had him being taken that high. I think Joey Porter was thought of as the fourth corner. I think he's now what? Could be fifth or sixth. Yeah. How are you looking at how things have kind of shaken out with that position? Because I think it's different than a lot of us expected.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little bit surprised that Porter hasn't gone yet. I thought the Ravens might take him, but once they sign Lamar Jackson today, then it's obvious you got to build around him. So that took that away. Porter, there were some rumors late in this process that he could fall out of the first round. I think Peter King had that in his column this past week or the previous week. So I don't know if that's going to come to fruition or not, but I'm definitely surprised that Porter is still around here at pick number 25.
Who, and I'm going to direct this to both you and Andrew, we're pick 25. There's not many picks left. Who do you guys find interesting from a Steelers perspective, assuming they stay put at 32?
I'll take it first, Andrew. A couple of names to keep an eye on. I've been out here for 10 minutes, so I don't know. Brian Brzee, has he gone off the board yet?
No, he's still on the board. Bill's pick is in, so we'll know soon. But yeah, he's still on the board.
Yeah, so Brzee would be a name to keep an eye on. He took a top 30 visit here. Keon White from Georgia Tech took a top 30 visit here. Porter could be a target for them. So those are three names to keep an eye on if they do trade back up into the round. Also, three names to keep an eye on at 32 if they stand pat tonight.
Ray, I want to get back into Jones a little bit here before the Bills pick comes in. Obviously, they gave up 120, pick 120 to get Broderick Jones. What did you think of the deal? Because there's still a trade. Was what they got worth what they gave up?
I mean, a fourth-round pick. I mean, I think that's a great deal for the Steelers. I mean, you look at the history of fourth-round picks. Sometimes those guys work out. Sometimes they don't. I mean, it's a roll of the dice once you get into day three. So, I don't know what the motivation was for Bill Belichick, but I thought that return was pretty light. And obviously I think it was a great move for the Steelers. I don't know what they would have been willing to give up, but to just give up a fourth round pick and a mid fourth round pick at that, I thought that was pretty shrewd by Omar Khan.
Andrew, I'm going to set you up with that question, and then I didn't give you a chance to answer. Who's intriguing on the board for you still for the Steelers' perspective?
Yeah, for me, I kind of stay consistent here. I keep going back to linebacker and cornerback being the needs of interest there. Nolan Smith is one who I just keep coming back to. Porter Jr. naturally, another one there as well. I don't know. It just seems like those would be guys. You could even throw out a Tyreek Stevenson if you really wanted to go down that far. Or Julius Brents from Kansas State. I don't know. I mean, to me, cornerback is a spot that remains a point of need. I know both Ray and Brian have mentioned that. And then I think with the linebacker spot, that's another one to me. Nolan Smith's just a guy who keeps falling. Maybe that's putting a little bit too many eggs in the same basket with getting Georgia guys. But, it's just something that screams to me is this was a program that's churning out guys. And Smith was an undervalued guy in a lot of ways. I know kind of a mercurial guy just based off his college career and, the productivity, how there were questions there, but just a guy that in a lot of ways pops off the page for me.
Ray, I want to get your thought on those two guys who are dropping, Nolan Smith and Will Levis. Obviously, Will Levis isn't as interesting from a Steelers perspective because I don't think they're going to pick a quarterback tonight, but I think they're the big stories of the draft at large in terms of guys. Will Levis looks pretty happy sitting there with his family. They got him on the screen. But what's your read on both of those guys? I guess we'll go with Nolan Smith first because I think he's more interesting from a Steelers perspective.
Yeah, I mean, the question is when is there value for the Steelers to take an outside linebacker in this draft? I know Smith maybe has some versatility with his size to be inside too. But if you took him in the first round, you already have your two starters in TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith. So how much playing time would Nolan Smith get? Would he get 25, 30% of the snaps, 40%? Is that enough? Is that enough justification to take him in the first round? Maybe if they did take him in the first round, it would tell you that the contract negotiations with Alex Highsmith aren't going well, or maybe the Steelers won't expect them to go well if they haven't started yet. So that's my thought on that. Just, to take an outside linebacker in the first round, I think you would have to commit to playing him more than 50% of the defensive snaps, and I just don't know if you can do that in 2023, given with Watt and Highsmith already in place.
Dalton Kincaid is the pick for the Bills at 25. So we talked briefly about him, I think, in mock draft season. Wouldn't it be cool if they had him and Pratt Freiermuth? I think it was just a matter of the Steelers have greater needs. I want to direct this next question to both of you guys because we haven't talked about this guy. We probably should have well before this. Jamie in the chat brings up Brian Branch is still there as another defensive back in the mix. I'll direct this to Andrew first. Is he someone you're looking at?
Yeah, I mean, he's somebody who comes to mind. I think it's maybe less of a need just based on the way the Steelers have constructed this roster and, what he provides as a guy who probably you're pegging there as a safety. Not sure that he possesses the cover skills to be that guy who you can slot in as likely a slot corner or somebody who would be a number one cornerback for you. I don't look at him as that guy. He's somebody who's an intriguing prospect for sure. Maybe not to the degree of other defensive backs we've seen come out of Alabama over the years, but a name worth keeping tabs on. But I don't know. What do you think, Ray? I mean, this is a guy who many people have pegged as being a safety over a cornerback. Kind of comes to mind to me as not somebody who's of high need for the Steelers.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Steelers need a slot corner. But again, it's the same thing I talked about at edge rusher. If you're taking a slot corner at number 32, or if you're trading back into the first round to get him, how many snaps is that guy going to play? Now, traditionally, it's about 65, 70% of the snaps. So I guess you could make that work, or you can make that, that could be a good value pick for you. But then you would almost, pin yourself into having to take another corner at 49 because you need an outside corner. I mean, you can't go into the season with Patrick Peterson and Akella Witherspoon and or Levi Wallace as your starters. They need to upgrade the outside corner, and I think they need to obviously upgrade the slot too. I just don't know if you do it with your second pick in this draft.
Do you guys read anything into the fact that, we're in the shank of the evening now. Things are these last picks feel like they're a little bit labored. Usually I feel like business picks up late in the draft, but a lot of these teams are really winding down the clock. We obviously saw, I think the trade was Jacksonville and was it Buffalo? I think they swapped picks. Is there a lot of, conversation on do you think that the delay here indicates that people are still talking well into the evening here?
Yeah, I think anytime you get past, pick 15 or 20 in the first round, a lot of times there's not a lot of disparity between the prospects, say from 20 to 40. So if you think you can move back and accumulate another pick, I think a lot of teams look to do that. So I'm not sure what the compensation was in that Bills-Jaguars trade, but I think that's a possibility for the Steelers as well. People are talking about trading back up into the first round. How about trading back from 32 and recouping some of those assets that you lost when you made that Broderick Jones trade?
They just showed him on the screen, Michael Meyer. I believe he went to Pine Richland. If I'm wrong about the high school, I am right that he is from here. What do you guys, just from a Pittsburgh perspective on that, is he a sensible pick here for Dallas at 26, or is he a guy that one of these teams needs to jump on for the first round?
Go ahead, Andrew. You could take that.
Oh, thanks, Ray. Yeah, no, I was going to say, I mean, logical choice there. And we've seen tight ends come out of Notre Dame and succeed to varying degrees. I mean, somebody who really, when you talk about Notre Dame's passing game, it really ran through him with the different quarterbacks that were kind of shuffling in and out of there. I thought he was the best tight end in college football last year, and there were a couple of different choices. Kincaid was obviously used more in the passing game there at Utah, just based on how much Cam Rising liked to work through him. But the different quarterbacks that Notre Dame was using in a first year, obviously for the head coach there with Marcus Freeman. Liked a lot of what we saw from there. Just a all-around good tight end who obviously has the pass-catching abilities, probably more adept as a blocker than what we've seen on the tape from Dalton Kincaid. I like him as a pick there for the Cowboys. Have had Dalton Schultz. I mean, maybe it's an opportunity to upgrade that spot, at least moving forward. We've seen the Cowboys have an insistence on good tight end play over the decades. So I think it's a logical pick. It's one you could roll with here.
Yeah, one name to keep an eye on for the Steelers as far as tight ends go, Darnell Washington, another Georgia player. He's the only tight end they had in for a top 30 visit. I'm not sure he would be a target at 32, but I think he could be a target at some point on day 2 for the Steelers if he's available.
Ray, I want to ask you about trading back because I think, we're kind of building suspense here for the possibility the Steelers could trade up back into the first round, that we could see another Steelers pick tonight. But with that 32nd pick and given the way things have played out, do you think there's any possibility they're going to trade back, or are there too many guys on the board that you would like to see in a Steelers uniform to think that that's possible, that they would move from 32?
Yeah, I mean, I took a look at the trade value chart a couple of days ago, and theoretically, you can get a late second-round pick and an early third-round pick, with the team if you're willing to do that. I mean, that didn't seem like enough for me to make a deal. Hey, listen, some team can come up with a better offer. Maybe you get a mid-second-round pick and maybe an early third-round pick. Who knows? But I think there's still a lot of good players on the board. We talked about some of them, but Keon White, Brian Brzee. I mean, if you're looking to upgrade that defensive line, look for a replacement for Cam Hayward at some point. I think both of those guys would be good picks. And we're now we're 5 picks away from the Steelers, if they stand pat. So there's going to be some good options there. Obviously, corners, could be an option too. But they could definitely do that. But I don't think you just want to settle just to accumulate picks. I think you want to get some good value in return and have an idea who's still going to be on the board for you when you do make that pick in the second round.
Ray, I wanted to ask you about Detroit real quick. They obviously grabbed Jack Campbell, who is a YouTube favorite. We talked about that a little bit with Brian when he was still on. Also grabbed a running back. I think those are two positions that are not, in the analytics world these days. Those are two positions you don't see people talking a lot about as first round value. What do you think of Detroit's draft, A, and B? What do you think about Campbell going so high? Because I know there's a lot of our YouTube fans loved him as a pick for the Steelers. I think you had him in one of your mock drafts as a pick. What did you think of the way things played out with him?
After they signed Holcomb and Landon Roberts to be starters this year, I don't know where Jack Campbell would have fit in. I mean, maybe they could have groomed him and maybe he would have been a starter by midseason, but obviously the Lions felt like he was really good because they used a first-round pick on him and he's going to step into their starting lineup right away, presumably. So, definitely a couple of curveballs with the Lions. I don't think anyone saw Gibbs coming off the board that early. I think everyone thought he would come off the board late in the first round. And I think coincidentally, that really helped the Steelers land Broderick Jones because that was just one fewer player that they had to worry about. So, I think Jack Campbell was going to be a good player. But to be honest with you, Adam, once the Steelers made those moves in free agency, I didn't think they were going to pick one early. They could pick one maybe with pick 80 or one of those 2 7th-round picks, but I don't think it's a big priority now as we go into day 2.
Andrew, another Big Ten guy just went off the board. Mozzie Smith from Michigan goes to the Dallas Cowboys. I want to get your reaction on him because he's a guy who came up in a couple of Steelers mocks as a potential guy who could fill a need. Obviously now he's shirtless in his video clips here for ESPN. But yeah, let's just talk a little bit about Mazi Smith as a guy, and now we're 27, so we're 5 picks away for the Steelers. What do you think of that pick for the Cowboys? And just go.
Yeah, it kind of goes against the grain of what I was kind of expecting there. I thought offense might be something that they try to address with that pick, but Smith is a really interesting prospect to me just because of you look at the tape of what he did in games like against Penn State, against Ohio State, against some of these programs, who obviously boast some of the better offensive lines in the conference. Just a throwback player. You put on the tape, you throw it on, you watch him. He's a guy who truly takes up space. You can put him in either scheme, a 3-4 or 4-3, maybe a more natural as a nose tackle. I don't know that he's maybe a great fit for today's game or necessarily the defensive scheme that the Steelers want to be running there. There's a reason that you've had Cam Hayward last as long as he has in this league for the Steelers because he kind of fits that role really well for them. I don't know that Mazi Smith would have been the guy to kind of groom to take over there. But for what the Cowboys want to do, might make a lot of sense. He was a guy who was dominant in college. The stats didn't pop off a lot of the times because he was your classic case of take 2 offensive linemen and let somebody else go to work. It's not necessarily the direction of today's NFL game, but an interesting prospect and a guy who had a big body certainly checks off those boxes.
Ray, any reactions there? Was he ever on your radar from a Steelers perspective?
Yeah, Adam, I'll take this one. Then I got to go back inside and do a little bit of writing. The Steelers were at Smith's Pro Day. He had some meetings with Mike Tomlin, so there was some interest there. And he's like Andrew said, he's an interesting guy. He is a freak athlete for a big guy, a guy of his size. But again, a nose tackle for a 3-4 team, you're not on the field a lot unless you have pass rushing production. And the one knock on Mazi Smith was he didn't produce sacks at Michigan. So, he's going to have to prove he can do that in the NFL. He's obviously not playing for a team like the Steelers. I mean, I'm sure they'll scheme it up and, find ways for him to be productive. But, just from a Steelers perspective, I thought he had more round 2 value than round 1 value.
Fair enough. And Ray, thank you for joining us. We always love to get your perspective. And hey, man, we're just getting started here. Ray will be back with us tomorrow night, right, Ray?
Absolutely. I'll be here, guys.
Yeah, we got to start teasing that day 2 stream because this one, we're 2 hours, 22 minutes into this. It's coming to an end. But Ray, thanks for joining us. Get back in there, get some good writing content, and we'll talk to you again real soon.
Okay, guys. See ya.
Bye, Ray.
Thanks, Ray.
And just a reminder, late in the evening here, Ray, you can sign up to read everything he's writing. $6 for 6 months of access. The link to that is down in the description here on YouTube. If you're on the Post-Gazette website watching this, click over to YouTube. You can get that link. Just $1 a month, basically going to get you into training camp, get you into the season at this point. So make sure you're signed up. Just another reminder, our live stream tonight is brought to you by the Acrisure Fan Advantage, the power to project one of our Post-Gazette beat reporters into your home or office using augmented reality. Great technology that we have at our fingertips now. So make sure you're signed up for that. With that, Andrew, I want to issue a correction. I was wrong about Michael Meyer. He is not from Pittsburgh at all. He's from Covington Catholic in Kentucky. So I screwed that one up. I don't know who I was thinking about, but any reactions to how wrong I was?
Well, I was thinking about it. It's like it might have been Phil Jerkovich. That was the name that maybe came to mind, was a guy who went to Notre Dame and was a Pine Richland guy. If I'm getting that one correct, I'm showing my Western Pennsylvania.
I know he's from Western Pennsylvania, and I know that because he came back to play for Pitt.
Yeah, so I'm right on that one. Okay, good. Glad I got that one right. Other than that, I can't say that I'm as adept at the high school football scene as I'm sure many of our commenters are. But other than that, all is forgiven, Adam. We're quite all right on this end.
I wanted to branch off on the Mazi Smith talk because another name that has appeared in every mock draft tracker I've done has been stubborn. But every week, there's been one multi-round mock that I found that has Siaki Ika of Baylor, the massive nose tackle in the middle, as a potential option for the Steelers. the longer we go here, let's say they get Joey Porter at 32. If you get Siaki Ika at 49, how are you feeling about the Steelers draft? Because like you said, you and Ray both pointed out why maybe a nose tackle isn't the best choice for a premium pick like this. But if you get your top two needs and he can just eat up guys in the middle, this is something I talked a lot about with, I think, Chris. It was either Chris or Brian on our mock draft tracker. You got a lot of running teams in the division. You've got Cleveland, you've got Baltimore, run-heavy teams. Yeah, man, if you get those guys as your top three, that's starting to feel like a pretty good haul, isn't it?
Yeah, it definitely is. And I think he's a good name to bring up for kind of a similar point that I brought up there with Ray is that, you only have Cam Hayward for so long, and it comes to a point where eventually you got to groom somebody to take over as the anchor of that defensive line. He's a name that makes a lot of sense. The Big 12, I'd be hard-pressed to tell you that that's known for its run-stopping abilities as defenses, but what he presents in terms of his physicality, a guy who's continued to get better as he plays more and more football. I like the pick a lot. I would like that one there, especially as a value guy later in the second round, at the middle second round pick for the Steelers. I think it makes a lot of sense. And if you do that, you pair that with a cornerback at 32, safe to say this was a home run of a draft, but would be surprised. I mean, just based off what we're hearing from Brian, what we're hearing from Ray, movement is very much on the table. I think we are not quite done yet with seeing the wheeling and dealing. I mean, that's speculation on my part, but I'd be a little bit surprised if they hung with these picks just based on everything we've been hearing and the precedent that was just set with the first round pick.
Yeah, the most recent pick was Anton Harrison goes to Jacksonville at 27. I find that very interesting, Andrew, because he's a guy that he's definitely a cut below some of these tackles we were talking about. Broderick Jones being one of them, who the Steelers just went with. Does the fact that someone jumped on Anton Harrison, who I think he's going to be fine in the NFL. I think he's going to be pretty unremarkable, though. I don't think he's going to be kind of a star guy. I think that was always the knock on him. Does the selection of him in the first round reinforce to you why the Steelers felt the need to go get Broderick Jones?
Yeah, I think so, because I think this really brings up the point that probably the biggest need, and I think most people would agree with this, is the offensive line or a cornerback were the top two for the Steelers there, and you probably felt there was more value and more commodities to be had from the cornerback spot. And if offensive line, specifically the left tackle spot, where you'd have to think that's where they're going to put Broderick Jones, you want to protect your franchise cornerback. You largely, you could say, since drafting Najee Harris, that he's been largely wasted, and you haven't really given him a fair shot. Now, there's questions to be said about his running abilities and his vision and all those sorts of things, but you got to give guys a fair chance, and you have to let them have the tools in front of them. I think that's exactly why. We're seeing this now. It's not a very offensive line heavy draft. I mean, Peter Skoronski at one point was pegged as the best left tackle prospect in the draft, and then people realized his arms were pretty short. It's not a perfect draft for offensive linemen, but considering how important of a need that was for the Steelers, it goes to show why they went up and got Jones.
I think we're in very interesting territory again, Andrew, because the Cincinnati Bengals are on the clock and the pick is already in, so it should be here shortly. What do you think this might be for them with Joey Porter still on the board? I think this is Steelers fans never want to see the guy they talked about, and especially when he is Joey Porter's son, end up with a division rival. They could probably live with him going to any other team, but if Joey Porter gets past Cincinnati here, I think a lot of Steelers fans are going to be feeling pretty good.
Yeah, you would think so. And not just that. I mean, God, who else is really looking good as a cornerback prospect here? You could reach for Tyreek Stevenson. You could go with Julius Brents, even Akili Ringo out of Georgia. To me, Joey Porter Jr. is the last clear cut of these first-round talents at cornerback. If he gets by here at Cincinnati, it's probably smooth sailing up until the Steelers.
Here we go. The commissioner is at the podium. Let's see what Cincinnati's got. We'll react to this in a second. It is Miles Murphy, a name we talked about with regard to the Steelers a little bit, just because they, kind of need an edge, like tweener type guy. Murphy's stock was really, I think going into this was pretty high. I think you could have maybe not seen him as like a top 10 pick automatic, but I think there were a lot of people talking about him in that 10 to 20 range, and now he falls to 28 with Cincinnati. What do you think of that pick? I guess primarily for what it means for the Steelers is a guy that they're going to see twice a year at least.
Yeah, he's an interesting guy just because of the physical traits, and what he's shown on tape is quite inconsistent. The highs have been high, but the motor is in question there. He's somebody who I thought really was a great natural pairing for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Line him up opposite Josh Allen, the other Josh Allen, of course. Thought that would have been a smart pick there for the Jaguars, but they pass on him. And yeah, it's a good pick for the Bengals just because he helps out in the pass rushing, which we know is not exactly the strongest of the suits for the Cincinnati Bengals defense. It's not something they're bad at by any means, but this guy is somebody who probably strengthens that, beefens up that defensive line, pass rushing from your outside linebacker spots, all those sorts of things. Like Myles Murphy, like the body type, good pick for the Bengals, and better from the Steelers' perspective that it wasn't Joey Porter Jr. This was probably second worst case scenario in terms of somebody who can directly impact the Steelers come this fall.
We've hinted at him a couple times, Andrew, but Brian Brzez's still there. We've talked about, I think a lot of Steelers fans, and I'm definitely possibly guilty of that. I just want to see where Joey Porter's going to go at this point. And if he's going to be there at 32, I think that's a home run pick for the Steelers to make. But if Brzez's still out there, what do you think of him in comparison to Porter, given that the Steelers, I think the need isn't as pressing at his position as it is at cornerback, and I think that's why I'm sure you guys in the comments are gonna devour me for that, saying anything other than a corner if Joey Porter is there. But Brzez still intrigues me, and he's there.
Yeah, he's still there, but I mean, I don't even know if he's my favorite defensive tackle remaining. I really like Keanu Benton of Wisconsin as well. He's a name that comes to mind. I mean, I don't know that it's such a clear cut. I think this really is, you like to say it in NFL drafts that you don't want to overthink it too much. This is when you don't overthink. If Porter Jr. is there, you said it, Adam. It's a home run if he's there. Go knock it out of the park when he comes onto your plate, if he does.
Christopher Carter is back, making a late appearance. We're 3 picks from the end. Chris, I'm just going to set you up and go. Whatever you want to talk about.
Man, this has been a wild draft. It's a wild draft every year, man, but I am aghast because I'm sitting here saying, oh man, like they're probably not going to get Joey Porter Jr. now, but now it's looking really good with only 3 picks left. I just put out my big board picks of who all I have left. Nolan Smith is the top on my top option there. Joey Porter Jr. after him, then tight end Michael Mayer out of Notre Dame, then safety Brian Branch out of Alabama, then defensive tackle Brian Brzez out of Clemson. Any one of those 5 are such a good value pick at 32 for the Steelers there. I would lean to Nolan Smith if he was there. I think his athleticism is off the charts. You could put him on the edge. You could train him to be an off-ball linebacker. I think he would be a killer Steelers linebacker in my book. And then here's the crazy thing. Like, you're looking at, some people might be looking at that tight end. I think Darnell Washington would be the 6th ranked guy I have, for the Steelers there. And I would wait until 49, the way that this board has played out, and see if he lands there. And if you could get either Porter Jr. or Nolan Smith and then get Washington at 49, I think you've done a great job. I also think that getting Julius Brents at 49 would be a heck of a move. But man, I think that the Steelers are really happy with how this board has fell tonight, to have Nolan Smith and Joey Porter Jr. still alive with 3 picks to go before they're up again on the clock at the 32nd overall pick.
Chris, is the way things have played out in I guess the second half of this first round, does it change your perspective or reinforce your perspective on the wisdom of selecting Broderick Jones the way the Steelers did?
Yes, because now Anton Harrison is gone, and like it's an even steeper drop off after him in my book. Like, for example, let me pull up my big board and look at my OTs. I had Darnell Wright there, Anton Harrison there, DeJuan Jones might be the last like one that would be a reasonable second round pick for them at 32, and then it is a steep drop after that to like the 49. And I'm not so like there's Matthew Bergeron, but I honestly think if they got a Matthew Bergeron or even an Anton Harrison, I think either of those guys would have to bat legitimately. Like they might not ever take the starting spot off of Dan Moore Jr. Because of how much further along in his career is, and I think that they have some more growing to do. Whereas, and the Saints just took Brian Brzee, so he's off the board there. So that's another guy. So they have a lot of different options there. But yes, I think the way that that offensive tackle has gone right now, when you see the cornerback situation, if you had taken Joey Porter Jr. at 17th overall, most fans would have been happy, and Christian Gonzalez went there. So yeah, I think it's totally fine for the Steelers how they've handled this situation.
Chris, I want to get your reaction to the division picks. Zay Flowers to Baltimore, Miles Murphy to Cincinnati. A, did you think they were good picks? And B, how do you think they impact the Steelers moving forward?
I like Zay Flowers, covered him in the ACC, heck of an athlete. And I think with Odell Beckham Jr. and Lamar Jackson, that could be a scary passing attack. I know a lot of people don't think that Lamar Jackson is that dangerous of a passer, but I think you get him some real weapons, he can be real dangerous. And Zay Flowers is one of those guys. Now, it's interesting that they passed on Jordan Addison to do it, and then he went right after that to the Vikings. Yeah, so I think that there is a I think that they did a good job adding there. I'll be curious to see how well the passing game goes. A lot of people also think with the change in offensive coordinator for the Ravens that Lamar Jackson's going to do better there. We'll see. It's a lot of changes. You're getting a new wide receiver talent as a rookie, wide receiver talent as a veteran. So we'll see how that goes. For the Bengals, Miles Murphy was a guy who going into this year was looking like a top 10 pick before he had his injury and was out for the season. And then he fell down board. So for the Bengals, I'm sure they feel like this is a steal getting an edge rusher who a lot of people, he has freakish measurements as far as size and athleticism. But his injury, some people brought into concerns. Yeah, Brezee's off the board, Jamie. So I agree there. But yeah, so heck of a pick on their part, but we'll see how healthy he is. I'm interested to see what the Bengals' path is moving forward because Jonah Williams has said he wants a trade from the team, and he was their 10th overall pick just a few years ago, and he was supposed to be a pillar offensive lineman the way that Broderick Jones is supposed to be a pillar offensive lineman for the Steelers right now, and he hasn't worked out at all. I thought the Bengals would maybe try to be aggressive to get an offensive tackle for Joe Burrow. I think if the Steelers, here's another motivation point for who they could pick in the second round. If the Steelers do get Nolan Smith and they get, they have a good rotation of pass rushers, they could be a real problem for this Bengals offensive line that I think is going to be hurting this year if they don't get reinforcements in this draft.
Chris, I also want to get your thoughts on the pick, guys. Kalijah Cansey, obviously, you hopped off earlier to write up that one, and then later Jordan Addison went to Minnesota. Those are, two big names in this Pittsburgh market. What did you think of their landing spots and where they can go from here in their careers?
Sorry, repeat. You said who are the two people you want me to talk about?
Jordan Addison and Kalijah Cansey.
Oh yeah, well, one Jordan Addison. I think people that were down on him was because of his lack of speed, but Jordan Addison was never fast. He was always explosive and quick and sharp and a playmaker through the end. I think the Vikings with him and Justin Jefferson as a 1-2 punch, that could be a deadly pair of wide receivers for years to come. And Kirk Cousins, I think, is smiling from ear to ear about the opportunities that are there. And I'm also curious to see, do the Vikings try to get one of these quarterbacks that's still floating around right now? So lots of opportunities there. As for Kalijah Cansey, I've been all about Kalijah Cansey being a first-round pick, 19th overall. I think is a really good spot for him. It's Pitt's first back-to-back first-round picks since 2007 and 2008 with Darrelle Revis and Jeff Otah. So another sign that Pat Narduzzi is doing all the right things for Pitt football right now and building the program in the right way. Kalijah Cansey is a guy I covered Pitt for a different outlet when he first started getting more snaps in 2020. And back then, Pat Narduzzi was just like, he's lightning quick. He's really fast, but he needs to do this and he needs to do this. And every time that he was challenged by Charlie Partridge, the Pitt defensive line coach, and Pat Narduzzi to get sharper, to be better, he did it. He would learn the technique. He would get sharper here, get sharper there. And he earned his way to being a first-round pick in the NFL. He earned being a unanimous All-American for Pitt. So huge night for him, huge night for the program to get him. And I think there's still quite a few Pitt players who are going to get selected this year. I think there's going to be at least 6 players who get picked in this NFL draft, maybe even 7. I think the last time 7 or more players were taken in an NFL draft for Pitt was like back in the 80s, if I'm correct there. So this would be another big sign of how far the program has come under Pat Narduzzi. But both two really good picks for those teams. I think that they'll be really good fits there.
I want to get into Keon White. I'll direct this to Andrew first, and then Chris, you can get into it. He's number 4 on Mel Kiper's big board. Is he someone we need to be? We've talked a lot about him as an option. Andrew, is he interesting to you as a guy who's still on the board? If maybe Philly or KC jumps on Nolan Smith for the same reasons the Steelers might want to.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, he's a name that comes to mind just because, I mean, wow, what an intriguing prospect there when you bring up the size at 6'5", 285. This is kind of exactly where he was expected to be. He was not a first-round guy, or if he was, a later first-round guy. It's an interesting one because I don't think he has the same, not criticisms per se, but the same concerns as you do with Miles Murphy about the motor or the inconsistencies, things like that. I think we see that a little bit less and less on the tape. The only concern there with him is I mentioned the frame and how impressive that is. It's kind of what got him through a lot of college. So he's a guy who's intriguing, but in terms of what he can do at the NFL level, I mean, this goes without saying. Any NFL fan knows this. It's about your moves. It's about what do you have in your tool bag. And I'm curious how that will develop and if that's something that the Steelers are willing to put into, because this is somebody who, to me, maybe is a little bit more of a project than, say, going after the cornerback there, or somebody that you can really plug and play versus a White who maybe is a more physical guy that you have to figure out how exactly you're going to put him into the fold.
Chris?
Sorry, I'm multitasking.
Keon White.
This Keon White. I think Keon White's a guy that you wait a little bit longer for. I'm not a 32. Wouldn't pick him at 32. I struggle to pick him at 49 because I just think there's going to be some really good talents. But the Steelers need defensive upfront depth. And he would be a guy that would fit that. His measurements are another guy. He's a really good size, really good length, gets off the ball well. I thought he had a good Senior Bowl week, both at practice. So I like him too. I think he'd have and the Eagles are taking Nolan Smith. That's off the board as well.
There we go.
Unless the Chiefs pick Joey Porter Jr., I think he is the Steelers' 32nd overall pick. Moving along there, Keon White, maybe at 49 if the board falls a certain way, but I'd be very intrigued to see how this plays out moving forward with other things. So really intrigued. Also would keep an eye on Brian Branch, the safety out of Alabama. They really liked him as well. He's a guy that's very smart on the field, can play safety, can play the slot, and can play a little bit outside. Wouldn't make him live out there, but they still have a lot of really good options who I didn't think would be available at this point of the draft.
Man, what do you guys think of Philly gets Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith in this draft? Jeez, Andrew, what do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, I've made my my approval of the Georgia defense quite clear on this end. And, just goes back to the Howie Roseman swindling and getting value out of picks that maybe people overlooked. I'm surprised these are guys that are overlooked, but, man, are we surprised at this point? I mean, there's a reason this team has restocked and retooled and reloaded and whatever adjective you want to use in there and verb. They keep succeeding. They keep knocking these drafts out of the park after years of being criticized for them and lambasted for taking the wrong guys. Like this one a lot, like that draft pick.
How about this? The Eagles have now taken, in the last 2 years, Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, Nakobe Dean, and now Nolan Smith. Just give them the whole Georgia defense. From that one, what do we just do? They're just taking Georgia. They said, hey guys, let me give you a great strategy. Let's take the best college football team and let's just draft all of them. I don't know how the Eagles are doing it, but they are doing it. Howie Roseman, that front office is killing it. I wouldn't be surprised to see them win a Super Bowl in the next couple of years.
Where do we think Kansas City's going here at 31? It's the last pick of the night, unless, there's no way the Steelers are trading up one pick, right? Because the Kansas City's going to take who they want. So what do we think Kansas City's going with here? These are the two teams that were in the Super Bowl. We love the draft that the Eagles have had. This is Kansas City's chance to get on the board.
It's tough. I think they lost Frank Clark to free agency. So I'm looking at edge options. Mazai Smith is gone. I gotta add. Sorry, I'm also updating my big board with who's getting taken as we talk. I've seen some BJ Ojulari talk. People really like him. Maybe they get Brian Branch. Maybe they add to that secondary a little bit more.
You set me up well, Chris. What do you think of the Brian Branch situation? Because he's a name we talked a lot about. I think more in the middle of the draft season from a Steelers perspective, but he's still there as well.
I love Brian Branch. I think that he's a really good. So he's a great communicator, great slot guy. Not really fast, right in the 4.5s, but you don't need him to do that when he's being in the right position all the time. I think that he's a guy that can play in the box, in the slot, outside, and play deep safety and be responsible for all of it. If you put him next to Minkah Fitzpatrick for the next 4 or 5 years, I think that they become a great communicating pair moving forward. And if you draft him now, you can still leave Demonte KZ as the number as your strong safety that has that role, and then float Brian Branch around to the slot and let him learn different positions, kind of like a young Cam Sutton, and just let him kind of grow there. So lots of potential for him there as well. But I also other guys that keep my eyes on. Darnell Washington, another guy I would really think that could really be a great fit there. Tight end out of Georgia. Another guy that I haven't mentioned much tonight, but Keanu Benton. I loved his tape out of Wisconsin. I think that he's a dominant player, and I think that he's going to be a guy that he could be Stephon Tuitt-like if he grows in the right ways, and that he can be very dominant against the run, very dominant against the pass, and just he can be another one of those guys that could be, taking on the torch from Cam Hayward as far as being a really talented interior defensive lineman for the Steelers. Like I said, though, lots of options right now. So many players I didn't think that would be still falling this far here. But hey, we'll see. We'll see how this continues to play out.
Can't believe I got to 11:46 p.m. without asking the question this way, but what grade do you give Broderick Jones as the Steelers pick? Because this is draft season, and we build up so much to it, but then once these picks start coming in, we immediately have to give a grade. Obviously, time's going to tell, but as you sit here right now, I'll start with Andrew. What grade do you give Broderick Jones, just to give a sense of how much you like him as a Steelers pick?
Yeah, for me, it's an A-, and I think that kind of goes back to two facets. One, it's the shrewd move by Omar Khan to move up there and snag him and make sure he didn't fall to the New York Jets. And also, I just like him as a prospect. I think, offensive tackle, specifically left tackle, was the biggest need. I think cornerback was something that could wait given the stature of the draft. They took a guy who was as projectable or as much of an upside as any offensive lineman in this draft. It's a big need for them. You needed to address it. They did. A-. I mean, you could even go as far as Billy says an A. I really do like this pick a lot. The only reason I knock it down the little percentage point there is because you did have to give up some draft capital. Fans will come at me, and rightfully so, and say that, yeah, it's a pick later on in the day. It's a day 3, day 4, but like it's later. It's not something that's of need. But still, you give up some draft capital, so it's not like you could stand pat and just kind of wait it out. So that's why you knock it down a little, but. Love Broderick Jones as a draft pick. Love the fit for the Steelers. Knocked it out of the park. A good pick.
Chris?
I give it an A+, and here's why. Broderick Jones is my top graded offensive tackle of this draft class. I think that he is a huge upside. I think he is a pillar for the offensive line moving forward. We need to see him grow. There's things he needs to sharpen, but I think the things he needs to sharpen are much like how Mike Tomlin says, I'd rather say whoa than sick him. His biggest problems are he's too aggressive sometimes, and he misses with his punches because he's trying to be aggressive. Mike Tomlin is rather say, hey, you have the right mentality. We just need to sharpen you up how you get there. But when you do sharpen that up and you keep that mentality of you want to just crush people in front of you, you want to break people's faces and all that, as Marshawn Lynch would say, they're going to be happy once he puts it all together. And I think that he's very coachable. In fact, Kirby Smart was on college football game day before the draft talking with that panel. And, they asked him about Broderick Jones, and he said, after every practice, he ran right up to me and he said, what do I need to do, coach? I love you, coach. Well, I will do anything for you, coach. And that kind of mentality of wanting to do the extra mile when he's already, being talked about like a top offensive tackle, that's everything the Steelers want. And to point things out, Andrew, I agree. They gave up some capital, but if you had told me that they had traded up and got Broderick Jones for just a 4th round pick, that was a winner. I was doing I look at all the different trade trade charts. I'm speaking too fast here. That's why I'm mumbling. But I looked at all the different trade value charts and what the Steelers were going to have to give up if they wanted to move up in this draft class. I did this on the Locked On Steelers podcast for a bit, but I looked at it and I was like, all the charts were saying if the Steelers wanted to move up to 14 with the Patriots, and I looked at specifically the Patriots to get ahead of the Jets, like you said, Andrew, and I had to at least give the 80th overall pick according to all the charts, and it could have recouped the 135th pick. So they would have had in that scenario, they would have had 2 4th-round picks, and they would have kept and they would have lost their 3rd-round pick. But to me, that 80th pick stay in there. This is a heck of a win for Omar Khan to only give up the 120th pick. And again, I think that whereas Joey Porter Jr., I still haven't seen the Chiefs pick yet.
It's not officially in as of now.
It's not officially in. I don't see anything on Twitter yet. The Saints took Brian Brzee. Okay, so that's off the board. But the way Joey Porter Jr. might be the pick at 32. But here's the thing: they lost that 4th-round pick. They trade down in the 2nd round. They can easily recoup that because someone's going to be, I think, will be aggressive for who's there. And then you could still get 2 2nd-round picks, a 3rd-round pick, and a 4th-round pick while making sure you traded up and got your top offensive tackle. For me, Omar Khan is handling tonight very well, and the board is falling very well for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
The Chiefs bringing out their 2 Lombardis to much fanfare for the Kansas City locals. A real power move. I kind of appreciate it. Before this pick comes in, I'll ask one last question, then we can kind of set up, I think, tomorrow and the Steelers' perspective, knowing what's on the board. Who's had the best draft tonight other than Philadelphia? Because I feel like that's my pick. Who are you most excited for as, with the picks that they made tonight?
The Texans.
Yeah.
Getting C.J. Stroud and Will Anderson Jr. and for the price that they traded back up to get Will Anderson. And Felix Anudike-Uzomah is off the board for the Chiefs.
Wow.
Wow. Wait. Did I get him? Did I get that one right? Hold on. Let me get started some pictures here. Move. Dang it. I'm trying to find my mock draft that I did recently.
He was the guy we spent a fair amount of time talking about. Yes, you got it, Chris.
I correctly picked Anudike-Uzomah to the Chiefs. This is the most random stab in the dark, and somehow I got that right. I have no idea. But so now, okay, updating things here. I'll give you guys my top 5 players on my big board still available that the Steelers could take. Cornerback Joey Porter Jr., tight end Michael Mayer out of Notre Dame, safety Brian Branch out of Alabama. Brian Brzee is off the board, so let me get rid of him. Tight end Darnell Washington out of Georgia. Center John Michael Schmitz out of Minnesota. I believe that's 5.
Yep.
Is that 5?
Yeah, you got 5.
Okay, so yeah, those are my 5 right there. I lean Joey Porter Jr. heavy there because I do think they need to find their cornerback of the future. But man, if someone comes, here's the other thing: you can, if you're Omar Khan and someone calls you and they're like, Omar, give us that second round pick. You can be like, listen, man, we really like Joey, so if we're gonna risk losing Joey, you got to give up something for real. And then you got to see how, and then there'll probably be some back and forth. It depends on who's jumping up for what, right? Because let's look at this second round order. You got the Cardinals, the Lions. So if I'm a team and I'm trying to get ahead of teams that need quarterbacks, the Lions, I think, could take a quarterback. The Rams could maybe take a quarterback. The Seahawks could maybe take a quarterback. The Raiders could maybe take a quarterback. So the Cardinals might be the thing that messes this up because teams might say, well, the Cardinals won't take a quarterback, so we'll just trade up for their pick and get Will Levis or Hendon Hooker or whoever. But the Steelers could just dangle that carrot out and just see, what do you get back for it? Can they get an extra 3rd-round pick, an extra 4th-round pick? And how far do they move down in the 2nd round? Lots of variables there, but I think Joey Porter Jr. sitting there, this is a dream come true for Omar Khan and the Steelers front office.
Yeah, I think you set me up well, Chris. What's the percent chance it's Joey Porter Jr. tomorrow?
80.
Yeah.
And Andrew, what do you think?
Man, took the words out of my mouth. I'll say 79. I mean, like it's that high.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a no-brainer, right? Am I missing something here?
I don't think you're missing nothing, Andrew. And you're a Penn State grad. You saw how dominant he was. I think it's interesting. You know, people look at his interception numbers, and I get it. One interception in his career there. And Adam, I'm sorry, you're also a Penn Stater. I apologize for leaving you out there. But when I look at Joey Porter Jr., the man was only targeted 30 times this past year. No one wanted to go at him. And I saw someone say, well, Marvin Harrison Jr. had a great day against Penn State, and he didn't do so great. He didn't cover Marvin Harrison Jr. So, like, that's not his problem. But when you look at the numbers on Pro Football Focus and who he actually covered and what he actually did, that dude was phenomenal. He didn't give up a single touchdown this past year, much like how Broderick Jones didn't give up a single sack this past year. I'm right with you, Andrew. I think that this is a very, if you're going to move the Steelers off this pick, you better come correct. And that might also be a position of strength the Steelers can be in to say, hey, be aggressive or else.
Andrew, any final thoughts on Joey Porter Jr., I think specifically, because, I know that's the criticism. Like Chris said, Marvin Harrison's running, but it was the same route, right? Wasn't it like 4 or 5 times? I was sitting there in, row 52 of NFU or whatever. He ran the same route like 4 times, and Joey Porter was nowhere near, the guy who was responsible for what happened there.
No, I'll put this out there just as way too early 2024 NFL draft preview is put that tape on when you want to criticize Kalen King in a year. That's a whole different conversation if you want to do that, because Kalen King got his lunch handed to him by Marvin Harrison Jr. Emeka Egbuka did not do the same to Joey Porter Jr. And if you want to put on the tape, if you really want to convince yourself, Steelers fans, that Joey Porter Jr. is the guy and that the stats don't tell the story, put on the tape September 1st against Purdue, Joey Porter Jr. against Charlie Jones. Charlie Jones is the guy that a lot of NFL teams like, probably going to get drafted here at some point.
Top 30 visit for the Steelers.
Right. I mean, Jones is a guy who's probably going to be a flex receiver or a slot receiver for a lot of years here in the NFL. Joey Porter Jr., I think in 10 times he was targeted by Aiden O'Connell when he was guarding Charlie Jones. I want to say Joey Porter Jr. let up like 3 catches for 20 yards, something like that. That's 10 targets. The one that doesn't happen that often in an NFL game, let alone any game against a pass-happy offense like Purdue's. 1 pass interference call, 3 catches allowed, 6 pass breakups. Come on. I mean, that's all the tape that you need to know. Targeted 10 times that game, 20 the rest of the way in the remaining 9? Nobody targeted him. Nobody went at him because the tape spoke it. The tape said the truth. And one of the comments there is why wasn't Joey Porter Jr. on him? That's a coaching decision that I can't speak for Manny Diaz. That's just junk defense that they were constantly doing. And Kalen King was somebody that they liked against the bigger body receivers. Joey Porter Jr. was somebody who was better out in space against Egbuka. That's a tactical question that we can ask of Manny Diaz. I wouldn't have done that. That's just how the game played out. I think it's reading too deep there. That's more pinning it on the Penn State coaching staff, which Adam and I are well adept at doing, than it is to pin that on Joey Porter Jr.
All right, guys. Final thoughts. There's the concert's going on. I think we're 80% Joey Porter Jr. tomorrow. Is there anyone? I guess the better question is, anyone on your intriguing list for 49? I guess maybe that's the thing we should talk about, because we talked a lot about JPJ.
If Joey Porter Jr. isn't taken, Julius Brents from Kansas State goes at 49. But if he is taken, like I think he will, I think you keep an eye on Darnell Washington. How far does he fall down? Keep an eye on Brian Branch. How far does he fall down? John Michael Schmitz and Joe Tippmann, 2 top centers who I think can be pillar centers, for their positions that they're drafted for. And then Keanu Benton, defensive lineman out of Wisconsin. Any one of those 5 Steelers, I think I think if they take Joey Porter Jr. and they land one of those 5 guys I just named at 49 there, I think that this is back to back dream scenarios for how this draft could have played out for them.
Andrew?
Yeah, final thoughts from here. I mean, I think you look at that spot there, mid-round pick, the next one after 32. don't rule out a receiver. I mean, that's just something that I know people have kind of pegged as a foregone conclusion. Don't rule that out. And I like a lot of guys there. I really like Jaden Reed. I really like Jalen Hyatt. These are two guys that excel at the college level with good quarterback play and great quarterback play, respectively. I wouldn't be against that. I wouldn't be against the Steelers going out and getting a big body receiver, big, long vertical threats, which both those guys are. Not speaking that into existence by any means and predicting that, but let's not rule that off the table, because there were a lot of fans who said the Steelers should get Jackson Smith and Jigba in the first round. They didn't go with the receiver. They obviously went with the offensive line, the smarter, safer pick, but I'm not ruling out them getting receiver in round 2. I think that's something that's very much on the table, at least round 2 or round 3.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. We are coming up. We're 13 seconds away from the 3-hour mark on the live stream. We had a lot of talk. Can we pull this off? We're just a bunch of writers here. We don't have a ton of technical skill, not a ton of broadcast knowledge, or I shouldn't discount everyone because you guys are all great. But this was something we didn't know we could do as a newspaper, and we've talked for almost 3 hours, and I feel like we could talk for another hour if we really wanted to.
I just want to say, great job, Adam. You've been on it all night. You've managed this whole thing. You did an awesome job keeping this show going, bringing in all the guests. Awesome show here. I do want to applaud everyone who was involved. I think from the comments that I'm seeing here from our YouTubers, I think there's a lot of people who are happy that we did this.
Absolutely. Yeah. We're glad we made the transition to YouTube this year. And we're just a reminder, we're going to be back tomorrow night. We're going to have the same characters coming through, giving their thoughts. So please make sure you're subscribed to the Post-Gazette Sports YouTube channel. Also, big shout out to Acrisure Fan Advantage. They sponsored this video. They helped make it a reality. So thank you to Acrisure for sponsoring things for us. Hope we got enough mentions in for you guys. And we're looking forward to talking to you again tomorrow night, because I think it's going to be another very interesting night for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So that is it from the Cecil Pennsylvania Bureau of the Post-Gazette. Want to give a shout out to Paul, my barber, the Cecil Barbershop. At the end of these things, they always shout out the stylists and stuff. Paul at the Cecil Barbershop gave me a haircut today. So shout out to Paul. And thank you guys for joining me. Tons of expertise. Really appreciate it.
You are now listening to. Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you liked the video, please like it and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you enjoyed it on Apple Podcasts, please rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. For 6 months of digital access to post-gazette.com for just $6, click the link down in the description.